Thank you for joining us. Are we ready, Melly? I've decided to dispense with my usual song that I sing at the beginning of meetings there, and you've heard that before, haven't you? Yeah. Call this meeting of the New Shoreham Town Council to order. Today's Thursday, April 3rd. It is 7:01 p.m. We have our first item is a request that we received from the Block Island Housing Board regarding a desire for a warrant item at the financial town meeting in the amount of $2 million. Some of you will remember that this was originally included in correspondence, but it's both the issue is important enough. We all felt that it was important to call it out, separately discuss it, etc. Anyway, Mark, I don't know if you want to start or how do you want to go? Great. Just make sure your green light's on, please.
We'll do that. Yes. Hi, I'm Mark McGuire. I am the new chair of the Housing Board, but don't worry because Cindy is still on the board and she'll keep me in line. So thank you for the opportunity. We wanted to present the project we've been working on for several years. We call it the Ball O'Brien Project. So next slide. The Housing Board owns Plat 18, Lot 2-3. It's approximately 2 acres, and it is on West Side Road next to the East Earls Ball development. The design we have is 8 buildings, each with 2 two-bedroom units, so 16 units total. 2 of the buildings will each have 1 accessible unit, and I'll give a little more background on that. The project has been approved by the Planning Board and the Zoning Board, so we're ready to go. Funding has been a challenge, and I'll talk about that. As of now, we've decided as a board to begin some infrastructure work on the site. We're putting a trunk line in there that will supply all the key infrastructure to the buildings when they go up. Next slide. So it's on West Side Road. It's next to East Earls Ball. That's a call out of the property. Pretty straightforward. It's like I said, it's almost 2 acres. Next slide. So here's a layout that we got from our design team, and you can see where the driveway comes in from West Side Road, and you can see the 8 buildings. Parking, those small things are cars, intended to be cars for parking. And so that would be the layout of the development. Next slide, please. Here's a little 3-dimensional view of what they would look like. We are going with modular construction. So the bit on the left, the color coding is only meant to indicate what the 5 modules are for each building. So they would come over and they would be put together. Next. Here's a floor layout of 6 of the buildings. So, living room, kitchen, dining areas on the first floor, and then 2 bedrooms up. That's sort of the standard design of each of the 6 buildings that don't have an accessible unit in them. That is 2 units. 1 building, first floor, second floor, 2 units. Next slide. Here is the accessible unit. So on the accessible unit, everything's on the first floor. So you can see 2 bedrooms, bathrooms, living area, kitchen, dining. So that would be the first floor. In the accessible unit in the upstairs, there are still 2 bedrooms, living area, dining area, and a kitchen area. Next, please. Okay, so the cost that we have, we put out bids about 18 months. We put out an RFP about 18 months ago, and we received 1 bid on infrastructure and 3 bids you could say, we say three bids, but it's really two because one was from Connecticut Valley for the whole job. One was from Avalon for the 8 buildings, 8 modular-based buildings. But their bid did not include finish work, didn't include integration and finishing inside. Buffalo Builders, however, they put a bid in conjunction with Avalon. So they're taking Avalon's work and they're going to be the general contractor to finish it up.
Does that happen on site or in the factory where the?
That would happen on site.
Gotcha.
So you'd get the modular units over.
Yep.
And then Buffalo would work to finish everything. So the total cost of those bids ranged from 6.4 to 7.5. That includes the infrastructure, which was about 1.1 to 1.2. And then it includes the building and the finishing. But as I said, it's 18 months ago. So we're going out to get updated bids now from those same people because we expect it to be 10 or 20% higher at least. But we're in that process. So here's how the funding breaks down at this point in time. We have approximately $1.5 million on hand. Some of that includes grant money to date. The Russo Foundation gave us a grant of $300K, $100K over 3 years. And the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank gave us a grant of $250K, which we're starting to use for the infrastructure work. And we've coordinated with them, both on site and talking with them on the phone. The solar initiative gave us $400K, and that will be for solar work sort of toward the end of the project. But we need to provide the infrastructure for that upfront. So we also have $2 billion of bond authority. And it would be our intent that we use our income to pay back that bond. We have approximately $160K per year in income based on a 1% tax on seasonal rentals. But it's, that in itself is insufficient to build and maintain properties. So as I said, we'd use our income to finance that bit of the bond. Right. We have applied to Rhode Island Housing a couple of times, and we have not been successful in 2023 and 2024. Both applications have been rejected. When they send you the no thank you letter, they don't really tell you much, but then they have a briefing afterwards over the phone, and what they've told us is that the development is too small for them, and the cost of construction per unit is too high. Those are things that we have a really hard time with out here. It's a challenge. We are going to attempt another application this year. There's more money coming available in the fall. So we will request an application. We will submit an application to request more money. We have come to learn that application success can be influenced by a town's commitment of dollars, which is important. So that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. Next. So I wanted to talk a little bit about need. I think everyone sort of knows anecdotally there's a need on the island. We did a survey, but the data is about 5 years old or so. But we have recently just resurfaced that data, and we do have 87 names on a list, on a waiting list. Some of them still active. Many of them still active, I should say. But we need to update it. We need to do an updated survey. At the time, when we did that survey, it was a majority expressing interest in ownership. And when we started this project, well, not when we started this project, but we did the development of the 6 homes, the 5 homes on Cherry Hill. And There was an independent survey conducted by the community, the Attainable Affordable Housing Community Forum in 22, a little newer. There were 68 respondents to that, and the majority at that time expressed an interest in rental property. So we're still deciding how much of this development will be sales versus rentals. We had initially designed it as rentals, driven by that 2022 survey. Financially, though, we might not be able to. We may have to just build 16 units, sell some so that we can fund the other units. That's one of our approaches. So we will determine that as time goes on. The East Searles Ball property has 19 people on their waiting list. And we're working with the economic development folks to determine overlap and flesh out those waiting lists. It would be helpful to have one single comprehensive list for the town. So, we'll reach out and try to cooperate to make that single list. The other thing I wanted to note that ADUs, the 513s, but the town and private organizations are doing a lot. The Housing Initiative is doing a ton there, and they're making significant progress on the 513s. And they may contribute to affordable housing as Rhode Island Housing defines it. But I've been just in discussions with the zoning official, and we're trying to determine how we can determine that, because the leases don't necessarily have the prices on them as I understand it, but we're just at the early stages of figuring out how we figure out if those 513s were affordable or in the affordable pot according to Rhode Island Housing.
If I recall correctly, we struggled when we did the new 513 ordinance with whether to require that and the rental amount declaration.
Right.
Chris, you would remember, our combined half memories might equal one memory, but I seem to think that we decided to have the filing be very clearly a year-round lease, but without the financial information.
Right.
Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
So that's difficult for us to go back to Rhode Island Housing, for instance, say we're below our target, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's hard for us to go back and say we have this many 513s and they should count for affordable housing. They may be contributing significantly to them. So we'd like to learn that.
Yeah.
Next, please. So we're asking here for a $2 million town warrant. We think it would consume about 1% of the budget going forward if it was on a 15-year bond. With that, with the Housing Board resources and that warrant and our $2 million bond paid for by the Housing Board income, we'd be more than 50% funded. We think it would make a much stronger case to Rhode Island Housing as we apply in the fall, as we apply this year for the fall money. We have been working with several mainland organizations who are doing affordable housing throughout the state. One of them being this Church Community Housing Development out of Newport. Their development director is a former official at Rhode Island Housing, and she has said it would significantly increase our probability of getting the Rhode Island Housing grant if we could show that there was money from the town as well. In addition, a few of us had a meeting with the new Rhode Island Secretary of Housing to discuss specifically this goal of 10% affordable housing in each community in Rhode Island. We were the first on their second round, and they told us, our official number is about 7.6%, which is short of the 10% goal. These 16 units would actually get us very, very close to that 10%. And the Rhode Island Secretary of Housing noted that.
Yeah.
She also noted that she wasn't really buying the argument that the cost per unit and the cost per unit was too high and the development was too small. She's brand new to the job, but that's just a note she made to us in this meeting.
Mark,
I-
can I ask if do you have a slide about the requirements associated with the Rhode Island housing funding? You know,
It's up to 120% of median area income.
okay,
Our median area income here is about 66K.
okay,
In fact, I'll note the Roger Williams University report that they put out every year just came out. Unfortunately, Block Island has the largest gap between median home costs and income.
yeah.
It's huge. Yeah. I don't have a slide specifically talking to that.
I just wanted to raise it because it's something that I often think of, like, are there, in quotes, costs associated with taking a grant, you know, you know, here's a wacky example. What if someone who lives in Cranston, who meets the guideline, you know, the affordability guidelines, here's that there's a new project going on Block Island. Do they can just say there's a lottery, they can just get into the lottery?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there are people on the list from the mainland. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know how we can, I can't answer that question right now, how to prevent that, or if we can.
I thought that had something to do, and maybe Cindy had something to do with the federal funding or that requires that. It's
Great. Thank you, Cindy.
Kind of like the conservation movement, which a lot of people don't have distinction between the Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy, and the Block Island Conservancy. Also, people get mixed up on housing on Block Island Economic Development, the
Right.
bed projects, the Housing Board projects, and the East Searles Ball project. So if you can, in your mind, kind of bracket East Searles Ball, that is a federal program, not a state program. And it is strictly regulated by federal agreements. So in that particular development, you have to meet the financial criteria. People there are on a waiting list, and the waiting list is available and open to anybody in the state.
Mhm.
You have to become a Block Island resident, which you can do in 2 days. But you could be on that waiting list, and if you are, you know, the next in line, if there's an open building, they are going to offer it to that person. And that is federally mandated, and that's one of the big strings that comes with that federal money. When we look at Rhode Island housing and the projects that have been done in Rhode Island, the same thing does apply. We have been able to say on Block Island, you must be a year-round resident here. The financial criteria is a little bit broader, which means that we have not had many applications from people away over the course of, I don't know, 50 units or so that have been developed. We have not had any placement of off-island people. But again, if you take state money, there are strings to it, financial qualifications, and if you are a Rhode Island resident, you are technically able to apply.
So I'll just follow that up with, when we didn't get those grants from Rhode Island Housing, there was sort of well, we don't have those ties. Right? Had money come flowing in from elsewhere, we would have said, that's great. We don't have those ties, but if we get the housing grant, we will have some ties.
Mark, I had one question. That 10% that you're referring to, there was, I think Chris might have put this together, I'm not sure, but there were, I think the Cherry Lane, Baker Hill, and the church, are those included in the,
Cherry Hill is not.
and how come Baker Lane and Cherry Hill don't qualify?
We're investigating that. I can't give you
So there's,
Okay.
okay, I'll let you, Cindy, you know better than I.
Those projects were completely funded by Block Island, by our income revenue stream. It has no strings attached. We have no obligation to the state in terms of how we administered those houses. Cherry Hill, 5 of them, Baker Hill, 2, and the church apartments, 4.
In Baker Hill is at the Coast Guard Road?
No, Baker Hill is Josie Merck's property off of
Oh,
West Side Road.
okay, yeah,
So
thank you.
the first project that the housing board did was Coast Guard Road. And those candidates were qualified at 120% of median income. So that met the state criteria and they were able to be added to our body of houses towards our 10%. In order to be considered affordable, you must, at this juncture, be 100, your qualified person has to be 120% of median income. The property must be deeded and restricted as affordable in perpetuity. And the candidates have to live there year round. So all of those houses fit that criteria. They counted towards the town's 10%. When we did Cherry Hill and Baker, we qualified candidates at 140% of median income, a slight jump up, which we have received. We went to the legislature and we got a bill passed that we could, on Block Island, have 140% qualifications because of the higher costs out here. And, but there was a little codicil in that legislation that said, but if you drop below 10%, you have to go back to 120. So they are not qualified. They qualified at 140, which was the town council gave us that ability to go to 140. The state does not acknowledge it. So those 7 units do not count. The church apartments are really affordable. You know, they would have no problem passing the qualifications for financing and who's in there and what they pay. But that property does not have those units deeded in perpetuity. So on the one hand, we'd love to have financing from the state of Rhode Island. On the other hand, the projects that we are doing independently work for Block Island. And, you know, we're solving our needs, without some of the strings that the state would impose on us. So it's
So
a
can I
double-edged
ask
sword.
sorry to interrupt you but when you say deeded in perpetuity, does that mean if these are rentals, they won't count towards the housing stock or they will count towards the housing stock?
I think that, no, the rentals would, yes.
The rentals
If they are-
would.
Yeah, if they are deeded, that they are always affordable. That's what Mark was talking about before is 513s.
Mhm.
513s aren't deeded in perpetuity.
Right.
So I
Right.
think for the state to acknowledge them as part of our housing affordable plan is gonna be a stretch.
Right.
I don't see that happening.
But at the same time, they're solving a housing need. So,
And so for instance, East Rose Ball, those 16 do count towards our housing pool. Because they are deeded in and.
Right.
so I'm wondering if I could go back to the list that you have. I'm a little concerned that the list seems loose. And I'm wondering if that could be, if that's something, like, I know you said you're contacting people and you're going to tighten up that list, but how soon could we tighten up that list? Like,
Not yet. No, not since we met. Go ahead. Okay.
Oh, sorry. So the original list, which thank you to Bonnie Ryan, Block Island Housing Board had a great list over the years. And forgive me if I don't get the numbers exactly right, but the original list that I looked at a few days ago, last week, had about 119 names on it. I just went through it quickly, and with my limited knowledge, unfortunately, some people had passed. Some of those people were lucky candidates and got Cherry Hill, you know, et cetera. So when I went through the list, I dropped down to maybe somewhere right around 198 potentially viable names. Allison Carly came to our meeting, talking about similar issues. And she independently took that list and started making phone calls. So her research is not completely up to date. She thought she would have a pretty good handle on that by Monday, Tuesday. But as of yesterday, she was looking at 89, I believe was the number she told me. So it's still a good number of people looking for housing.
Well, so here's another, another question I have is, I'm just curious, how have you arrived at, by not having a current list, how have we arrived at everything being 2 bedrooms and not some 1 bedroom, some 2 bedroom? I'm just wondering, because I see other problems arising, right? Like if I am a single person and I get this 2 bedroom apartment, well, now in all likelihood, I'm gonna have to rent the other bedroom out to someone in order to make that rent work for me. Um, you know, a- am I gonna rent that through the summer? Am I gonna rent that year round? Do I even want to live with anybody else? Or if I rent that out to a couple, are there now 3 cars for that apartment? The parking's always a little bit, especially in that area, right? Because the overflow, we all know parks on the road. And we've all had to deal with that. That's a mess over there already, right? Before we add more demand for parking. So I'm just wondering, have we weighed like the list to see, if you're an older person, if you're an older single person, do you want to have a roommate? I mean, who wants to be like 65 years old and have a roommate?
Well, this is going back, quite a few years, envisioning,
time.
yeah, before your time, envisioning, how to design these things. And the collective wisdom at that time was 2 bedrooms seemed to fulfill the needs of most of the people that were looking for housing. Keep in mind that the designed units are quite small. I think they're about 800, 750, 800 square feet. So even, it is a 2 bedroom, but it's a small 2 bedroom. And part of the problem is efficiency of design. So when we're going modular, if you are replicating the same structure, it's much more efficient financially to do that. So, for instance, East Earls Ball would be the one that is most similar to any development that we have on Block Island. They have 16 units there. They have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The predominance of 2 bedroom units. So it was a judgment call. The 2 accessible units are the little bit smaller.
Cindy, how many units do we need to, or Mark, how many units do we need to achieve that 10%? Are we short?
Technically, I think 18, but I guess it would, yeah, 18.
The more houses that are built here,
The top
number
goes
changes.
up. And is there going to be a continued effort to try to get those units that were counted? Because it seems like obviously if you hit the 10%, there's an advantage to it.
Yes,
Yeah.
Many people. And
right.
maybe
Yeah.
fail, but
Sure.
at this moment, they're not counted.
Hey, can you explain how the rent works on this, right? Because right now, the average in Rhode Island for a 2 bedroom apartment is $2,500 a month. But these would be based on each person's income rather than the state average. How would the rent be calculated?
So we would use the adjusted median income number and stay within 120% of that. And then anyone within 120% would go into a lottery. But is that what you're asking? Or you're asking how we're going to determine the rent, the monthly?
I guess I'm asking, how is the rent determined? I don't understand that.
If you have state money, it would be determined by Rhode Island Housing.
And then potential tenants would qualify. Okay. And then, so I guess I'm going to go back to, let's say I qualify, right? But now I'm like, well, but I could rent that other bedroom. Is that kosher? Or is it like, how does that go? Is that I qualified? Do I still qualify if I'm taking rent for the other bedroom?
I'm sure there are stipulations against that in Rhode Island housing, but I don't know that right now. I mean, we would talk to our attorney to figure out how that would affect what rent could be charged.
And then who oversees it? Who would manage this? Does somebody within the town have to manage this, or does the housing board manage this, or?
So that's sort of what we originally thought, although we don't want to. Turns out we can't. So there is a requirement, a state requirement that affordable housing developments have to have a, what's the term? A monitoring agency. You have to have an independent monitoring agency. And so we would have to hire someone like that. And there are people who do this throughout the state, but we would have to hire someone like that to monitor the property going forward.
Well, East Hills Ball has that, correct? So it's like a property manager also when they take.
Project based on the federal guidelines. They are the ones that collect the rent, determine who's eligible, deal with evictions, deal with empty units. They are responsible for paying.
And the cost of that presumably is through the rents or?
That's the plan.
Now, would maintenance be handled through the rent as well?
Yes.
And who would the monitoring agency be the one that decides like a window needs to be replaced or a
So I,
appliance needs to be replaced, or is, what's,
I would think they have boots on the ground. Jim Newborn, a local person who is the man on site. So repairs, complaints, the water heater just blew, he would be the first person, and then.
so we don't have this for Cherry Hill.
No.
And it's not, yeah, it's home ownership, so it's not, yeah.
But I think the difference with that is there's some federal subsidy, I think that continues along with that because the rents are controlled based on your income and so forth. So the difference with this is if it's not continued on, or if it's not continued with some outsourced funding of that changes where the rents fluctuate, the money has to come from, from somewhere to pay for the agency and the repairs and so forth. So I think you're looking a little bit different setup. Is that correct?
Financial model is the same.
Cindy, can you use the microphone just so people at home can hear it?
The financial model is similar to East Earls Ball, only the state is a little less restrictive than the feds. So East Earls Ball, they have a certain range of rates for the size of the unit. They qualify the person, meets those financial guidelines. They are paying, those people only pay 30% of their income. And then the federal government subsidizes the gap between what the market rate is on the unit and the gap. So
is that considered low income?
very low.
Housing?
Very low,
But
yeah.
this would be-
Section 8, some people may be aware of Section 8 housing. I think that is the wrong term for East Earls Ball, but that's the closest that I know how to term it. It is very low income rental rates. This that we are contemplating is moderate attainable rates, hence the 120. So the challenge is to make our investment and our carrying costs be covered by the rent, still be able to have funding to maintain the buildings, and have a capital improvement fund, a sinking fund, so that, the project goes well for, till we're dead and gone, that it will be able to carry on.
Amy, back of the envelope, what is the debt service on a, whatever it would be, 10, 15-year note for $2 million? We didn't even plan that.
So at $2 million, 15 years, we're looking at about $180,000. 20 years is about 145,000 annually.
Okay,
I don't think I'd go 10 years on this one,
yeah.
but we're in that range, 145 to $180,000 when it comes online.
So if the town if this were to pass, become a warrant pass, at financial town meeting, we would pay roughly whatever, 150, 60 grand a year for 16 affordable units
Yes.
for 20 years.
And who owns them? The housing board?
Housing Board does, yes.
Can I go back to where we were talking about, the Ball project where, it was low income, this is moderate. So if on these apartments, you would qualify, your income, would you qualify them only once, like some of the others, or do you qualify yearly for those?
Yeah, so yearly is, is what Cindy says, yearly.
Sure. So in these units here, you would qualify yearly on to make sure you fit within that, but the rent on them would have fluctuation it would have to have fluctuation in order to cover these costs that go along with it, because there wouldn't be, am I correct? There wouldn't be any subsidy from the federal government on these.
Correct. This is a state, right? No federal money.
That's what I'm,
Yeah.
so is there any subsidy from the state on this?
Just the capital, just
Right.
the capital.
But so my point, the difference is when we're looking at Searles Ball, the cost of the rent on these are going to be dictated based on what it costs to operate it. So if there is so operation would be whether the payback is on whatever loans there might be, whatever repairs there might be in the agency. And so one's rent, does it have to be within a certain to receive this money? So are we sure that number matches out to what the cost is from the other side to it?
We're in the process of putting together a pro forma and a model. And as I said earlier, some will be sales, some might be sales, and some might be rents. So it'll be based on how many we sell and how many we rent, the cost that we're going to carry going forward. Because the sales cost, if we sell, those costs will be dealt with by a homeowners association and the people who buy. So,
Oh, interesting. Gotcha.
But just to back up, the previous two applications that we submitted to Rhode Island Housing had the whole pro forma. So the numbers did work on paper.
Sure.
It all worked on paper that, the carrying costs, the construction cost, the rents that we would receive all balanced out. Because Rhode Island Housing's not going to give us money on a project that the numbers
Right.
fall short. So, they did work.
So you're saying they work based on rentals, not ownership?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
For the last two applications that we made were completely
Rental.
16 rental units, and the numbers did work.
So the transition to X number being sales would be driven largely by capital.
yes. Yes.
And
Almost wholly by that, yeah.
Yeah.
And if the numbers didn't work for whatever reason, where would that liability be back to the taxpayer? Would it be back to where would that go?
Housing Board, I mean, the taxing,
But is the housing board backed by the town? I'm getting yes.
well, we don't get any income from the town.
The town didn't, but if the housing board didn't have the revenue, then where would it, in other words,
I know exactly what you're asking. At the end of the day, I don't think the town would ever want to tolerate one of its boards defaulting on a capital on a bond, right?
Sure.
It's a good question.
So the answer is probably the town.
I think.
In one of the models you brought up, it was interesting, you had said, and first of all, I appreciate the work you're putting into this. I know you looked at different ones. One of the models you had talked about was to possibly, let me just use the number, build for and sell those. My
Yes.
question would be, if you did that, because you're gonna be selling some of it, sounds like anyhow, if you were to build the 4 and sell those, would that give you enough money to do phase 2 of, say, the rental of it?
We think so. Yes. I didn't explicitly present that plan. It's been discussed by the housing board. So yes, that would be the idea, but we don't want to go down that road until we get through the Rhode Island housing application and see how much we get from them. But the number that are sold, or the amount we get in grants, would determine how many we need to sell versus rent, and where we would cross that line.
So without any warrant being done, is there a path to be able to use that model? Although it may not be preferred, is there a path that you could build the 4, take the revenue and do the other 4 or 8, whatever it is, as rental?
Well, we'd be well below 50% funded if we didn't go forward with the warrant. It would increase our ask to Rhode Island Housing. It could.
Does the sale number though change, like if you're selling units? Because I don't know what you sell, from that end of it.
We still have to sell them affordably. So the answer to your question, I don't know those numbers, but because we haven't done where we want to cross the line. But it would get us a long way, but I don't think it will get us there. Plus, we don't know the updated estimates. That's the other thing that's kind of out there.
That's a big unknown.
Yeah, it's a big unknown. Go ahead, Chris.
Chris Warfel, Housing Board. Very good questions on the financing. And we have developed a pro forma that's pretty dynamic. We can put in the number of houses to be sold to make us cash flow positive. And so the town is not having to bail us out. We've done pro formas at 4, we've done pro formas at 8 units, half the units. And it all, with the warrant and Rhode Island Housing, looks very good. What happens is, with this warrant, we lower our cost of construction. We are much more competitive in their eyes, and they have said this, and they have also said they understand we're on Block Island and we need special consideration. So we have a dynamic model. It's very flexible. We can put in just about any scenario you want and show what the repercussions are. 4 and 8 houses look good. Okay, thank you.
And so we're working through a lot of that stuff now. We didn't want to miss the opportunity for this year, so that's why we're here tonight. So that's all I have. It is. That's it. I mean, I can show you a lot of backup on how the sewage is going to work and all that stuff, but that is it. But thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thoughts. This was really helpful, and I think makes the project seem much more real to me, which is, I say that happily. There anybody from the audience like to talk about this warrant proposal? No, it's not.
Kathy, you've got to use the microphone if you want to talk so everybody at home can hear you.
The
It's frozen. That's why I came.
Oh.
I'm sorry to say, it didn't work.
Uh.
Take a shower. I just am curious if this is a public meeting to discuss the 2 million to whatever. I'm not a math person, I'm not a real.
so
Language, not, can't keep up with it.
sure. s- So I just want to, just to answer the procedural question first, Kathy. The Affordable Housing Board voted to ask the town for a $2 million warrant for this project. We received a letter, and normally when letters come in, we acknowledge them, as part of what you've seen, as part of our regular process. This was not just that, so we, as a council, decided to schedule it on its own for this kind of briefing and Q&A, because it would be a significant investment on the town's part, and wanted to have this kind of setting. Now, just another step procedurally, Amy, are your legs long enough to kick me under the table, or Millie? Okay. We approve the warrants next week, so, right? Or the week after? Is it the week after?
20, yeah.
Oh, okay. But in other words, we're not going to vote on whether to do a warrant tonight. This was informational.
If you don't know what warrant is, a lot of young people don't know what warrant is. That are
Yep.
Interested in housing, you have an interest.
Yeah.
I understand their interest, I have a lot too. If they can find a place to work hard, you don't need to have a government subsidized housing. But what I want to know is when are the public going to know about the details? I couldn't see the pictures of the houses, that's why I came here.
Mhm.
Where's the models? This is a major, I grew up in a city, Miami, Florida. I know what housing is. And I'm not a hillbilly here. This is not Block Island. It's dangerous. I just want to say one thing and I'm gonna leave. Because if I get mad, you're not gonna like it. When that low income over there, I call it Section 8. Because I grew up with Section 8, I know all about it. People came from the Dominican, you weren't here, to Providence and got into our housing. They're not there all winter. They're making money all summer. They make more than me. Their cell phones cost more than me. And they're in Dominican all winter, and their apartments are empty. So we have failed at Section 8. We have failed the school teachers. They have their housing, and I'm glad they do. But they don't pay taxes like I do. I can't afford to live here. You all, I voted for you. I voted for the lawyer. I did vote for you. Because you were running, you were in.
It's
I voted.
totally
for
fine.
I did not vote.
You voted for Tristan? Yes, exactly.
Still am happy. It's up to you guys. I'm into Doge, I'm into Trump, I'm into repairing our country. I want my granddaughter to live here, I want my granddaughter's granddaughter to live. And this is gotta stop. It's up to this board to say no. Look at the Champions Marina next door to that. What is that? That's gonna be a marina? What is it? For wherever she is, for her paddles, have a place for her paddles, whatever that architect lady down in that. It's all failing. We're a failure. We don't have a community. And I hate that. And who's the guy with the K? What's K stand for? I call it dollars, money. You're afraid to say hundreds of thousands of dollars? No. Well, I'm K, I think that's what.
Hey, Kathy,
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. You didn't vote for me. Would anybody else like to speak? Come up. Yeah, make sure the green light comes on.
Green light's on. All right.
Yeah, and then identify yourself.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm here in support of my peers. Right here? All right. So I'm in here in support of my peers. My name is Jessica Rosado, and I work at the USPS here on the island. I will be out of my current housing by June, as the landlord is welcoming family to stay for the summer and can't accommodate me. I'm lucky this time as I'm able to move in with my boyfriend on mainland Rhode Island, Though if I did not have this opportunity, I would have to move back in with my mother, out of state again, like I did in summer of 2023, when I helped run our visitor center and social media at the Chamber of Commerce. Similar to then, I find that I have nowhere for my dog and myself to stay on the island for another season. The wonderful community that I've become a part of, the opportunity to work at a great municipal office, and more are just a few of the reasons why I would love to get to stay. But due to lack of housing on island, not only do I have to say goodbye to the close friends that I've made here, because of my job's requirements to wait for transfer, I must now also have to consider quitting my career position altogether, as commuting daily is unaffordable and unrealistic, frankly impossible. Though it is too late for me, consider that a future ambitious and active, like-minded young man or woman get to live and work for this town by giving them the opportunity to rent affordably year-round. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Right. Makes my heart ache. Go ahead, Aaron. Yeah, just light it up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin. I'm just a local citizen, but bear with me. I'm sorry. I'm not a very good public speaker.
You're great.
Groll, Groll. Yes. I'm lucky enough to have year-round housing. I have affordable housing. And finally, after years of not having affordable housing, I was lucky enough that somebody was willing to open a door for me. Unfortunately, right now, that's the exception. I am considered lucky to be in this situation. And there are so many other people who have been here a lot longer, who have families here, who have careers here, who have a lot more of an attachment to this place than I do, who don't have that. They didn't get lucky like I did. They don't get that same opportunity. Having adequate, affordable year-round housing should not be an exception. It should be the standard. This project is 16 units, but that's 16 units in the right direction. That is 16 units that could be housing people, taking them out of the pool of people who are in the constant Block Island shuffle. This could be helping people who have been here for years who haven't had appropriate housing in over a decade. There are people living in unfortunate conditions, inadequate conditions, and then there are people who get stuck living in abysmal conditions because they don't have affordable housing and they have to take what they can get so that they can stay in a community that they care about. Local services continually run understaffed because they cannot attract and maintain qualified professionals without housing, and they cannot or do not offer compensation commensurate with the increasing demands of the local market. Standard civic and residential services cannot support their people due to the unaffordability of housing. I would like to impress upon the council how far-reaching these decisions are. The working people of this island make its economy possible for every single participant in that economy. That means every single person who sees a provider or works at the medical center, attends, works at, or participates in any way at the local school or early learning center, holds a post office box or works at the post office, works for the ferry or the airport, works for the vital life-saving services of the rescue squad or the fire department or police department or dispatch, works for harbors, works for the highway department, works for the highest quality local library I have ever seen, works at our only grocery store, transfer station, gas station, power station, hair salons, the pubs and the restaurants. Basically every single service on this island, domestic services, housekeeping, landscaping, house checking, caretaking for the elderly and disabled people of the community, and any resident who owns or personally operates their local business. Every single one of these categories has people who need housing, and they have been working hard. Many of them have been working hard for years, and they're still waiting for somebody to open a door for them. This shouldn't be people waiting and rolling the dice every year. Let's not forget that construction workers and residential trade workers like plumbers and electricians compose a significant share of the local labor force, and they stay in demand building and renovating houses specifically to be short-term rentals or rarely occupied second or third vacation properties. One of the great cruel ironies of the local economy is that these workers build empty bedroom after empty bedroom only to end each workday not having a place of their own to go back to. This town is not a bunch of buildings. Its substance is in its people, and its value is in their quality of life, which is currently lacking for many of the people who serve this town. This magic 8-ball approach to community management is fundamentally unsustainable. No reasonable person can expect a community to prosper when the bulk of its working class people are struggling to subsist. Local employers cannot house employees, so they struggle to maintain staff, which hurts their business, further chipping away at the local economic landscape every year. And workers being expected to rely on their employers to provide for their basic needs creates ample opportunity for exploitative labor practices. And I know many of us have at least seen, if not directly experienced, the consequences of that. A healthy local economy means people can afford their basic needs without being exploited, maintain their financial stability, and have socioeconomic mobility. If you say you are pro-business, you must recognize that businesses are composed of real people living real lives. They are not figments or disposable tools, and that you have a responsibility to your working class and low-income residents to support them if you want this place to thrive. This town cannot operate without the people who keep Block Island running, and those people, the people who provide the labor on which we all thoroughly rely, need a foundation to stand on. This is a chance to provide that foundation. This is a chance for the town to invest in itself, and I think the council would be remiss if you passed it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
I
For
know you-
someone who's not comfortable with public speaking, you were terrific. I may have some things I want to advocate for later in the year, so I'm going to call on you. Thank you, Erin. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Sue, Sue Koval. I have been a seasonal worker here for about 22 seasons, and this is my second winter. And I'm lucky enough to have housing because I rent from Monica Hall Shea. Yes, I do. And she's a lovely woman, and I feel lucky. But would I like to have my own place? Yes, I am a hard worker. There are a lot of people that would love to be here year round and keep it going, even though we do hibernate in the winter and a lot of things are closed down, but a lot of things are open. And it's sad that my friend Jess has to leave because she doesn't have housing. And it's seeing the young people that want to have the jobs, that want to have the year round. And then we have a lot of people that are basically retiring. And it's like, we're going to have a town that's not going to be run by anybody because everybody's going to retire, but the younger generations can't rent anything to help this town keep going. It's a beautiful town. I love this place very much. I wouldn't be coming back and living where I live if I didn't love it. And I think it just shows how much the younger generations do. Erin's speech was wonderful. She touched on so many things that we all want to say, like everybody, whether they're the barista, whether they're working at the medical center, whether they're at the library, whether anybody that's contributing to this community should have housing. I mean, a lot of people, I'm a single woman, I will take a room, a bathroom, and a little kitchen. I don't care. I'll pay what I have to pay. But this is what we're coming out saying, we love this island. We want to support this island. We want to thrive this island. And I understand we are a tourist island. Without them, we would not exist. But yet, we still do exist 6 months out of the year. We need to expand. We need to say, hey, this kid that just loves this island, that just graduated, let's get them the jobs and the housing. And I understand, I think it was Roy Rogers said, invest in land because they're not making any more of it. Well, can we invest in our land? Because we're losing wonderful people because, no offense, we can't get it together. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks. Excellent. Anybody else? Nobody else? Tom.
Thank you, David. I've been watching you folks on Zoom a lot
I'm sorry.
on the main line and 3-hour meetings 3 nights in a row. As your town physical therapist, the best one on the island, by the way, the only one. You need to stand and take some extension breaks when you can, okay? You might have a timer in your computer, just extend. But I'm just really grateful to be here. And I'm behalf of everyone and you folks for being so kind and understanding. I'm talking in favor of housing. I've been here 10 years, started out with just a jar teaching Tai Chi and a half day a week, and now I'm pretty much 4 days a week on your beautiful island. But the medical center provided some housing through the Thomas House, through, what's the other one? Where Liz Loescher was, where Dan, the Hoyt House, the Thomas House. And then they rented from Isla Schumann and Naomi Kirst, who's here. So I've been moving around myself, thanks to the generosity of this town and all you folks to make it happen. I have housing for the first time, and I love it. It's amazing. Generous people. So I'm grateful for that, but I want that for everyone. And I'd like to thank Mark and Cindy and Chris for all their hard work, and Aaron, what a speech. But I just met with Chris and we talked about this meeting and how to try to get the 2 million. And he said, I just want to make the island a better place. And I think we're all in the same place. So I just really support the efforts that
Thank
you
you, Tom.
heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mark, Cindy, Chris, thank you guys so much for the time tonight. It was really, really, found it very helpful. And the people who came and spoke. Not you, Aaron, but terrific.
And just to add, you know, I don't want anybody to go away thinking that there's any great reluctance. If there was a way to do this, you know, and if there was money there to do it, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. It's been a struggle for everybody to try to find a way through this. And it's something that's, you know, it's across the boards in the, you know, in the whole country. And it unfortunately hit us, you know, in the late 90s and the early 2000s when prices just shot up. And, you know, we're trying, you know, please keep coming. And
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Millie, do I need to convene the public hearing or do we merely segue into it? Can I have a motion to convene the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. We're now in a public hearing. You feel different? Do you feel different now? Because we're in a public hearing now. I think we're supposed to be listening to them. Q&A to them. Just my own opinion. Then, you know, like I want to talk about the ELC. And if we have any other, I have a couple, I'd like to figure out a way to fund. Old man by the sea. Or we, you know, whatever. I think we should talk about those. So we're really, yeah, to really. It's my first time here in person. I didn't hear that. Wow. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We love you all very much, but we want to get home at some point. Would anybody like to speak on this year's budget? Anybody like to speak? No speakers? Anybody out in the hall? Do you think there's anybody out there who wants to speak? Jesus. This feels weird. Because you're scary.
Millie.
I know, that's right. Yeah, exactly. That's so true.
Millie.
That is so true. Millie?
Hi, just procedurally, keep the public hearing open while we go through each line or close it for discussion. I said, do you want us to keep the public hearing open for our council discussion on the line items, or should we close it?
I would be inclined to just keep it open.
Just keep it open.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And at the end of this, do you want us to continue it or do we adjourn this and then reconvene? Okay, great. Terrific. Fantastic. So what we talked about, was it last night or the night before? God almighty. Okay. We talked about last night was coming with things that we wanted to discuss among ourselves. I don't know if anybody wants to start. Somebody want to start?
Well, I'll toss one out because I had two people stop me today and ask why, and Mike isn't here, why the town wasn't considering a large municipal snow blower as opposed, which would be about $6,000 to $8,000 as opposed to the $25,000 for the tractor with the blade. And I've just wanted to ask Mike if he had considered that.
I can ask him that question. My sense is that they were looking to replicate the machinery that had worked well for them previously, which was a tractor that also goes back and forth to Heinz Field. But I can ask him that question.
Yeah, because Dave Sniffen hadn't specifically asked for any particular equipment. And in terms of climate change, we had a lot more snow, back in the day. I said I would ask the question and get the information back, so.
Yep.
I had one item that I wanted to touch base and I mentioned it to Amy. Under the current system we have right now, we're in we have some temporary positions as of the town manager, finance. We have made some adjustments on that. And under the wages, and I think what has happened, we've extended this system that we're using for 3 months while it's in its works as to get these positions filled, which I think is extremely important. Allocated for our next year's budget, there's an additional 20,000 that we had asked to use as a placeholder. And in this budget that was presented, we had put it under the town clerk's salary. I support the work. First, I want to be clear. I support the work that our current staff has done. They've done a great job and I have no problem with the compensation. What I'd like to do, Amy had put out, I think it's roughly 20,000 without doing the math, and asked that we use it as a placeholder. What I'd like to do, and I want to support that because we don't know how it's going to fill out. We still have we may have a backfill position in the town clerk's office. So in the finance. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to take that $20,000. I'd like to support what was requested and move the 20,000 into our contingency. Hopefully things will work out. We won't need it, but should we do need it, it will be there. And I think it's more appropriate, identifies the wages, particularly for like for the public works director, police chief and town clerk accurately what they are, what is for those positions themselves. So I want to support the funds. I just like to see that $20,000 put into contingency. And then when there is a plan, because as of right now, there isn't a set plan. When there is, if we should, whatever it might be, we have those funds available at that end. And I don't know, do we have to do this as?
I think, I don't know. I think, but most of the stuff we can probably just do by consensus and, then when we have to vote on it, we can. Does that approach make sense to you, Amy?
To work by consensus?
No, I'm sorry, the first one.
What Bill had put forth.
Putting money in contingency.
It doesn't mechanically work. It does mechanically work. The budget is recommended as it's presented. And as I described it earlier, to me, it was important because we are in an interim phase to not pick and choose which things might stay and what that landscape might look like, but to present the status quo, which is how it is today in the absence of a new and different program. So my recommendation doesn't change, but certainly it's the council's budget at this point. And you know, from a mechanical perspective, as what Bill has described keeps keeps the total funding the same. And so to the extent that I think the total funding that we have today is hopefully sufficient going forward, it works to do that. So
And
we are.
I
just want
under,
to make a motion to cut it. That's why I wanted to put it into the
Save it,
contingency
yeah.
and to save it. And that was, so, because my position on that, I want to support what you're saying.
Mhm.
So as not to make a motion to cut it, I'd rather put it into the contingency. So we're following your request, you have the ability to do it.
Mhm.
So that was my reason from that end of it. And I do think that they should reflect those departments should reflect what they are, because we don't have a plan and it isn't presented yet. And I'm trying to be supportive from that end of it. So that's the reason.
By the same token, you know, I disagree with you a little bit that, you know, this is a budget for starting July 1. So in a lot of ways, this should look like what we're contemplating. And, you know, everything that we talked about as status quo is through June 30th. This gives us the option to come back to this, which, you know, seems to me to be smart. We're not losing that money. We're just putting it someplace else and we can pull it right back in if July 1 is going to look like this. I think that's works for me. I don't know about the rest of you.
As long as the money's still there and it's largely an accounting thing, I mean, I don't have strong feelings about it, but if you and Bill do, yeah.
And this is nothing, this isn't saying that
Oh, yeah.
we may end up where we are now. I don't know. It hasn't been presented to us. I think it's cleaner. I think when we go to the public with it, I think it's cleaner. I think the optics are cleaner. And then when we come out with a permanent positions in this, and if there's no increase, great. And if there is, we have the money earmarked, and we can say how we're going to support it from that end of it. So.
I'd like to open up the library, the assistant director for 60,000. I guess the first one would be the current director under his contract. Is he putting in a full week? Is it 40-hour week?
Yes.
It is.
Yep.
Now, the current staff, they just went through the latest negotiations?
They did.
They did. Okay.
They did, you know, it's a little bit dicey talking about negotiations, but I think it's fair to say that they had a lot of feedback that wasn't necessarily incorporated specifically on position descriptions. And so that's
Who's the
something,
they there?
the library staff
Okay.
and the director. So while we did reach a resolution and an agreed to contract, there are still some open discussions about exactly how those positions are defined.
Okay. So with that being said, is this 60,000, would that be going towards staff that is on hand now? Is someone moving up?
Yes. So
The disbursement of the job?
it does not add an additional person. It takes the existing staff and classifies them differently. So that somebody who is currently, bear with me while I get there.
19.
A staff who is currently reflected in wages other would then be segregated out as assistant director.
So what I heard, and I'd love it just to be corrected on if necessary on this. My recollection is Kristen Bauman left, and there was just to sort of take it at face value, there was no one who was ready to take on the directorship, who was a current employee of the library at that time. And what Bob was suggesting, what you were suggesting in this proposal, is that this was an opportunity for a year to get the next person ready for when Bob wants to move on.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a time frame, but
Yeah, or
i-
okay.
in general,
That's
it
right,
was an
there was a-
opportunity to start to cultivate in-house somebody who could step into that director role
Right.
next.
So. And I looked at, when you were talking about it being someone on the wages other, looks like it's decreased by that $60,000. So it's just moved from one line item up to the next in a different
Exactly.
title.
There's no additional. staff.
Additional.
You know, that 60 is a placeholder. Again, that job description hasn't been sort of accepted by anyone. It's still there as a proposal. But that's the intention, that it's not adding anybody, it's creating,
Training.
it is
starting-
creating that role and perpetuating that role over time so that we are hopefully continuing when the assistant hopefully becomes the director someday, we would be moving somebody up into that assistant position to continue that succession planning.
And the library would be run by one director instead of two people, a director and a co-director moving forward.
I think they're still intending to be director and assistant director.
Okay.
I haven't heard conversation about co-directors.
Assistant, you're correct.
Okay.
This seems like really good succession planning. Does this need to go through the union to the position description? Once there is a position description?
There will be a conversation that involves the union. I think that's as far as I want to say today. But
Okay.
yeah.
And then let's say we move forward with this, the union moves forward with this. That doesn't mean that means when the, or does that mean when the library director leaves, that job gets advertised, right? This person doesn't necessarily just roll into that position.
No, presumably you would still go through an exercise
Okay,
to make sure you're choosing the right candidate, that candidate is ready.
right.
Yep.
Amy, one of the areas I'm a little concerned with is the building maintenance. We've taken on a number of buildings we have,
Mhm.
and we have the facility
Manager.
manager. And I think unfairly to that position, I don't think I think half the public thinks it's a screwdriver in hand, and the other planning, and the other part is driving the building inspector around. And I think it's really unfair to that employee, because I think that job description is not clear to a lot of people. And there's, I think, a lot of people that feel that, it should be the screwdriver in hand or whatever it might be. I think it's important that get clarified so people know the fairness there. But I also think that with the buildings we have, we need to be proactive on our maintenance, not reactive. And I mean, proactive having the bodies. I know Bob Gallant does quite a bit of it from there. And I'm just concerned that, and I don't know that this is a place right here, I'm just concerned that we're gonna fall behind on this, especially as we take on the houses up at the Thomas House and so forth. And when I think about the Coast Guard station, I just wonder if we're getting to the point where another person in-house or whatever it might be, as opposed to having to subcontract some of this work out to look at from that end of it. And I know it might be a little late in the game for this here, but I think that's something we need to put on the front burner to that.
I think it's important to acknowledge, and it's not ready for this budget, both because of where we are in the timeline, but also I don't know that we're quite there. But it's something that's going to be coming. How do we continue to keep the momentum that has been there over the last few years on these building maintenance projects? I think it's fair to say that recently we have been able to do a lot more work with subcontractors, and that at the moment is feeling successful. But like most things, that ebbs and flows about whether you can get the right people to do the jobs. And bringing up somebody else in-house may be a good option, but that's something we'll be planning for over the next few years. The role is a little bit different, and I think that's a different topic. Similar to the library, we agreed on a compensation program and reached some conclusions with the union. Some of the things that were outside of that final agreement were some of those job descriptions. And I think that's a great example of one where the preliminary job description still didn't adequately reflect the work that's being done day to day. So that is an ongoing project in the background.
Can I add on one of the questions, one of the points Bill made was around concern about being behind on maintenance. And I think it would be worthwhile to have Mike, whatever, singly together, talk about the systems that they've put in place to sort of stay current on maintenance, because I didn't realize it until probably last year or the year before that one of the things that I think it was Tom's project was implementing a whole regular system for a lot of that stuff that we were perpetually falling behind on. So I guess my point is, I actually think we might have data on that. Like,
Sure.
in other words, if the light bulbs in the school library can't come up and that takes 12 weeks to do, then, that tells us something. I'd love to learn more about that.
But that job has been presented with past administration in many different ways
Yes.
to what that role is. And I really don't think it's fair to the employee, from that end of it. And I think that should be made, and it goes back to Sam Bird. What was a desk? What was the other? So I think you get the point from that.
Yeah.
One of the other things I want to bring up is the mini grants. I'm going to defer it over to Molly, if you can chime
Okay.
in on this, on the mini
Yeah.
grants.
Oh,
I think that I think that we want to try to come up with some funding. I don't know what the exact number might be. I think Allison can help us out better
Yeah.
with that. And I think there may be some funding she had mentioned to me that she outside, which is good news, and I'll hold that for her. But I think that's an important thing, that if we can, whether it's shave 500 here, 500 there, to and I don't expect it to be the 30,000, we had the windfall, but I do think it was a healthy thing for the community, and we should try to do what we can to support that, with her input.
I agree.
And in Allison's report, she mentions contribution from the Mary D. Fund. I don't know if I read it right, because I seem to be the only one who saw it, of like $15,000. At some point, can you confirm that that's actually so we know what amount we want to add, if it's be above 15,000 or
And
starting
my
at
understanding is that is not a contribution to the town, but a program that they are going to initiate based on the model that we've used.
right. And it was a description of what the mini grants were last year and an intention to follow through. So it sounds like it's a duplicate program. I just want to know, are we going to start at 0 or are we starting from 15,000 going up? We could clarify that before our next meeting.
yeah, I wonder, could we have, I don't know, Allison or Marguerite or somebody come and,
Yeah, she sets out a whole report on the costs of the ones, the people who attended. This is all, it was in the
Go
email
ahead, Amy.
today.
I'm
So-
having email complications.
Oh,
I'm not getting my email,
Go ahead, Amy.
so I didn't see it. So can I ask, I thought we were going to go through this in order, but we seem to be jumping around.
Why don't we?
Molly,
I
there-
mean, that'll keep it a little more fluid. Do you want to just
Yeah.
start at the beginning, Molly? So we don't miss anything tonight?
yeah.
8:25.
So I'm just wondering, I just wanted to go back and ask, on page 9, under administration, the deer management. So just wondering if we could consider adding $2,100 to that line, which would bring it up to 37,500. Oh, the deer management, line 8,200. So $2,100, I chose that number because right now we're funding 236 deer tails. And I'm just wondering if we could bring that up to 250. Or the extra money would pay for either 14 additional deer or 168 tags if we were paying for the $1,250 per tag reimbursement. Either way.
And is there any chance that we have that $7,500 savings in health benefits? Could we use some of that and apply it there? Is that possible?
Yep.
mean, this is not something I want to vote on right this second, but I just want to float it so that
Yeah.
we can float it.
Molly, are you saying bring that to 37.5? And that would be 250, funding for 250, yeah?
37,500 would fund 250 deer tails at $150 per tail.
And was there also a request, there was some talk about the deer tags, and I don't remember all of it, maybe
So one person said the deer tags were
that was. Paul.
reimbursed and
Oh.
another person said they were not reimbursed.
No, Paul said they were reimbursed, but he didn't
He didn't
choose
choose
to get reimbursed
Right.
for his.
Uh,
That was
Yeah.
what I heard.
Or the deer tags are reimbursable
Deer tags are
Yeah.
reimbursable
from this same fund.
from the same fund.
Okay,
Not everyone submitted them for reimbursement.
got it.
So that means.
Some of the math isn't gonna.
So your math isn't perfect, but
Yeah,
your
my math
concept
isn't
is
gonna
there.
work as neatly as but I'm wondering whether we could add $2,100.
Okay.
So,
Well, I think I'd like to know how many deer tags were put in, because, I mean, if the goal is to have enough for 200, see what I'm saying from that end of it? Because if there was, whatever, $1,000 on deer tags, you know, you're taking out, you know, whatever, 10 deer, whatever it might be.
It's usually a number in the $500 range, but
Okay.
I'll see if I can pull it up.
Molly, can you help me and tell me what line that is?
what's that?
I can't find it.
Page 9.
Page 9.
Page 9, it's
Thank
under,
you.
it's hard to find, it's under administration.
Line 82.
Gotcha.
So far, I've seen no deer in here.
So add what?
2,100.
Okay.
It's on
No, I'm saying
page
take it out
9.
of the health benefit.
Yes, right. Gotcha.
Was that the recommendation, Molly,
Well-
from the health benefit savings?
Yeah, I just want to put it out there. I mean, I know we're going to have other things that, you
Yep.
know, I mean, Mona's, the overage that Mona let us know about, it's not going to cover everything that we want. But so this is just one idea that I have. Yeah.
So Amy, from a procedural, if we have something like this, does it help if we find another spot that we're willing to say, hey, should we?
It's not necessary
Okay.
in that we do have the health insurance savings that reduce the budget that you have in front of you. And you have additional capacity between the 3.75% levy and 4%. Doesn't mean you shouldn't if you want to reduce something, put that on the table too.
Yeah.
So the maximum we've ever reimbursed for tags was 2,500. In recent years, it's been more in the 750 to 1,000 range.
So the way that program works, did we used to reimburse for tags but not do the tails? Is that why that would have been so high? I'm just
I don't
wondering
have the
if-
data that far back in front of me.
Yeah, okay, that's no problem. I was just wondering if maybe now that they get 150 per tail, they just let that 1,250 go.
Go.
I think that's what you heard from Paul. Yeah.
Yeah.
And since they took the bulk of them, that would add up. I mean, if he took a, but it was 100, you know, there's $1,200 right there.
Yeah,
So,
it was.
So that's-
A lot of money.
It was
Yeah.
real money. It was-
but that would explain why there was probably a decrease.
I mean, I'm all for reimbursing all of it. They're doing us a service.
Page 10. Finance.
Are you okay? Did you want to stop from the beginning or you're?
I think we are. now.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
that's what we're doing.
I
That's what
believe
we're
we are.
doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You spoke on 10, are you done?
Yes.
Page 11. Human Services.
I had concerns on the ride service. You know, we had budgeted the 8. after speaking with Allison, I have a lot of confidence that that is going to be tightened up. And I'm more comfortable than I was when we first had it. So,
I agree. I think if anybody's going to tighten it up,
yeah, Jesus.
tell us.
Yep.
Dispatch.
The ride services, that goes year round, right? Like, so if there's a
Yes.
senior who needs a service even in August.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we're on page 12, central dispatch.
This is a small note. Just, I mean, obviously we see year over year, we got the electricity rising, and I know that there's multiple meters at the fire station, but one thing that bothers me is that constantly in the firehouse, the lights are on when there's no one in the building. May it be a security concern? I don't see that the fire trucks are afraid of the dark. And when there's no staff in that section where the equipment is housed, those lights don't need to be on 24/7. So that's just something to look out moving forward.
Sure.
And like I said, I believe that there is separate meters. And then another thing watching this climb is the issue that the fire service, I guess that's me. I thought you were turning it up.
Apparently you feel very strongly about this.
No, well, no, this one's more of the O2 that goes to the medical center that we're generating all the time. And there's huge costs associated with running that oxygen generator. And I think it's a discussion that we should have with the medical center moving forward, 3-phase, to see if there could be some cost sharing associated with that one piece of equipment that's running quite often.
That's that machine at the back of the building?
This machine is housed currently in the Connex container on the west side of the fire station, in between the rescue building and the firehouse.
Gotcha. They fill the bottles.
Right, I'm
For
just trying to think,
both.
the night of the Harborside fire, right? They were filling oxygen bottles from some. is that the
Totally
machine?
different. So those are the self-contained breathing apparatus for
Okay,
the
okay.
firefighters. This is actually medical grade O2. We just happen to fill it at the firehouse.
This is not a speak now or forever hold your peace, by the way, but anything else on dispatch?
Yeah, just the,
Go ahead.
okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Mom.
No, go, Bill, you started.
I was just gonna say, on the hurricane preparedness, I don't even know what it was for in there. It's not in here now, but do you remember what that,
Yeah, it used to be the ads that were run in the Block Island Times.
right?
And we actually used to get reimbursed for
Right.
those. We don't run them and we don't get reimbursed for them.
There is some, actually, there may be some coming down, but if it does, we can deal with it from that end.
If it comes, that's
Yep.
great, but
Perfect.
Go ahead, Molly.
I was just wondering, we had some money set aside for improvements to the building for the reinforcing the building.
Yep.
Have those things happened yet?
they are underway.
Okay.
And we will have permits.
Those are outside of the budget, right?
Those are reflected in the current year budget. So in the fiscal year 25 budget is where we see those. Anything that needs a permit should have a permit.
Thank you.
All right. Page 13, are you on dispatch, Bill? No rush.
No, just underground maintenance. That's the mowing, right, Amy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Page 13, police.
Amy, on the accreditation, I realize we moved it down to the 8,000. This year we only spent, and I'm all for the accreditation, but I'm also realistic to, there's a lot going on. That 8,000, how is that broken? What's anticipated to be spent on the 8,000?
It's not, it doesn't have detail behind it. So the 2250, I think I mentioned last time, is a fixed payment to the accreditation body. But that's the only direct expense that we've had to incur so far. So we, as you can see, it was up at 15,000, not having had to tap into that because the chief's been able to use free resources in other departments. We took it down, but didn't take it away entirely. I think you could trim that, and then if expenses came up, we would have to deal with how we paid for them. But it's designed to keep momentum if they needed it, but there are not specific expenses identified.
So would the expense be like someone actually sitting down and physically writing the procedures?
It would be consulting
Stuff like
work,
that.
yeah.
Gotcha.
And like I said, he's been able to tap into other departments' resources who have volunteered their time
Sure.
and attention.
Was
So-
the 2250 a one-time or is that an annual?
I believe it's annual. That's my understanding.
So is there, if we cut it down to 5,000, we'll put 3,000 aside to allocate somewhere else, what do you think? Do you think that would be?
I think that's okay. Yes.
And I wouldn't even mind waiting to see if we need the three. And if
Yeah.
when we do this, we come out, we say, guess what? We don't need the three elsewhere, then fine. But if we need the three, go back to that. Or,
I think it would be helpful to hear, like, if Paul says, I was hoping to spend $5,000 on people writing stuff this year, it would be helpful to know that.
I don't believe he said that. I
Okay.
can double check.
Great.
Yeah, let's just see what his opinion is. And
one of the things with this, and I think would be helpful for the chief is that, your policies all have to be, a part of the accreditation. And so, he can get help outside on writing some of those policies and so forth. So I think that would be, a good thing moving forward. It shows good faith for the trust. It's healthy for the department. I'm sure, they haven't been updated. While I was there, they fall out,
Yeah,
life gets in the way.
100%.
So, I think that would be a good thing to be able
Yeah.
to utilize some of that funds on.
and then on 6,900 technology/data processing, that is gone up about what, $7,000 from 5,000, and we only spent 34. Is there some reason why that's at 12,000?
Yeah, the 34, that's not necessarily representative in that a lot of the
Correct.
technology work, both last year and this year, were paid for out of technology capital. So they're deploying a lot of new systems. So you have those fixed costs up front, and the sort of second year of licensing for software hasn't hit yet.
Okay,
So I would be hesitant to reduce that. at this
okay.
point.
Amy, we were going back and forth on seasonal wages, and I don't want to go too deep into that, but is there enough money budgeted in this to cover what you think may be the recommendation? How's that?
Sure. We spent a little time even after this was published going through that. If you had a little extra funding, they would take it in the seasonal police range. They're probably in aggregate with the new compensation program, about a quarter person shy of a perfect staffing level. So we talked through that, decided we weren't going to request a change
Year-round?
necessarily, seasonal.
Okay.
Um,
What does a seasonal quarter person cost?
So I would say we're about
Which-
12,000 short. About 12,000 short from what we would consider.
Well,
perfect
if we have
staffing.
room on the accreditation line after you look at it, I would certainly support the idea of moving some of that money up to the other line item.
Okay.
And we have some flexibility, as you said. I mean, I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I just am not, I don't want to be sitting here in the summer, with people burning out or with, challenging situations happening. We've been lucky for a couple of summers, and say, geez, if we had just put money in for a sufficient number of bodies,
And you're gonna have an officer in the academy, I believe, in August. Amy, is that correct?
Yes.
So
Oh, good.
while we're paying for that, we're down a person while that person is there.
And we've mapped that out.
Great.
So that is already incorporated in the system that we've put together. And that,
So those dynamics will change next year. She'll have that body. So
yes, I think the whole staffing program when we start to look at 27 will be very different.
You know, Bill, you know, because you've been coming to these meetings and you were chief. When you look at where we were and how much we were struggling with this a few years ago, we've really made some positive steps, and I really appreciate that because we had one time when I guess it was just me who was on the council, it was a harem scarum for a while.
Right. I think one of the advantages we have is, the chief has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
He's seen back when, I hired him going back over 20 years ago. So he's seen when we've been thin and when we've, been a full complement. And I think he's realistic to that and to being able to be creative and so forth. So
Yeah.
I think that's worked out.
Yeah.
The CSO line, does that reflect CSOs? Is that incorporating housing as well, or is that just more CSOs?
It does not. That was based on the historical, just the historical average of our wages, and then what Paul had said he was going to hire for CSO, Chief Dean.
So more CSOs.
Yes, and so it does not include the housing.
What is that housing down under 5,500? Is that?
Where is that? That's a different line, right?
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah, most of that housing is not going to be CSO related since most of them we either try to get at the Coast Guard station.
Right.
And there may be some candidates this year who have housing, which is great.
Last year was an issue though for housing, wasn't it, for CSOs?
It was, and they didn't hire what we would consider a full complement, but it does look like they'll be able to do that this summer.
Great. Anybody else on page 13, please?
Just on the housing, Amy, can you touch base on that? Because, not that I have any question with it, but just how does that kind of break out?
Yeah, no problem. The housing, what that is that would be our housing payments to MACLAC, so Seaside essentially. And then also some units that we rent over right in the corner here of the four-way stop. Yep, and then also includes the police chief's stipend. And for the a bulk of that, or at least a little more than half of that total is what goes to MACLAC.
And there's how many are housed above there? Is it whether three, 2 or 3? Yeah.
I can get you that in just a second. I can get you that answer. Circle back.
Yeah.
And then you also said the chief also has a housing stipend?
Yes, in his contract, there's a housing stipend for the chief.
And then just to go back, I should have thought of this before, but like dispatch. What are we doing about, or do we have applicants for that?
We are advertising. We don't have applicants yet.
Amy, was there I'm sure there was, but there was an adjustment with the, I want to call it with the compensation study. The dispatches there was an adjustment in there also, wasn't there?
All NSEA employees were
Okay, good.
adjusted. Correct.
And when we talk about the housing under police, do we have any, do we have any idea that even just for the summertime, whether the Thomas House, which you say won't be ready till probably July 1, and there's a room for like 3 people to house there, could any of that be CSOs if we don't have anybody else, or do we know who's coming? Or
So there was a, again, this hasn't come to the council for policy decision, but there was a lot of consensus among the staff that it was not in keeping with the intentions of the Thomas property for us to right out of the gate, put seasonal staff in there. That to the extent that people needed year-round housing, that was our first priority, and we needed to get the lottery going and get people in there year-round. And so we would not be using that for seasonal staff. Now, to the extent that there are year-round officers who have an interest, they will go through that process, and it may free up other spaces that are covered in that police housing, but it wouldn't be seasonal summer police.
Oh, yeah, no, I can understand that. I was just thinking if it was only, if we're only just starting it now, and technically, you know, if it was a, yeah,
Yeah, we went back and forth and decided
yeah.
that wasn't the right first step.
Are you ready to move
I
on?
get, Nancy, I get where you're coming from, trying to save a little money in the housing. So I guess we'll swing back to the police. That's offered to them first. So do we have to do this annually? Approach the police department first and see, or if they.
Actually, twice a year.
Okay.
And so again, we'll get into it in the Thomas, but it's always good to talk about it when it's in people's minds. Twice a year, we need to poll the police staff and see if anyone has an interest in those 4 units at the Thomas property. And that's under the consent decree. And to the extent that there is an interest from someone who's not currently occupying one, they would take residence at the expiration of a lease of anyone who is not a police officer. So those non-police leases can only be 1 year at a time.
But I thought that the consent decree would only apply to the Thomas House proper, that the building behind was built by the town with town money, separate from John Thomas's house, so it wouldn't be subject to the consent decree. Or is it because we purchased the whole
We're
property?
treating those together. The manager's house has a different set of policies. But the Thomas House, 2 units, we are treating as the same program in that it was the town's decision to use 2 buildings as opposed to building 4 units into one on the existing footprint. You know, that was our decision about how to configure that existing front property as opposed to on the side.
I apologize, I didn't follow it. So
Yeah.
the Thomas House has 2 units in it, and then there's a separate building to the left, which has
With 2
2
units.
units in it.
Yeah.
And then there's a town manager's house, which is all on Thomas property. The original, Mr. Thomas's house, that's restricted by the consent agreement, correct?
Yep.
Is the house to the left also restricted?
That is the town's interpretation and understanding, yes.
That's too bad.
Yeah,
Because, the only reason I say it is, because if we purchase the property, then why wouldn't the town manager, you know what I'm saying? Too bad that couldn't be split off. But
We can talk about that when it's sort of
Yeah.
agended separately, and we can go through the consent decree and.
I was going to say, can you dig out a copy of that consent decree? Because the initial housing element that Violet had was the chicken coop or so. So it was only probably going to be 2 units. You know, I want to see how Joe Priestley and the probate court worded that to see if, you know, it'd be nice if we could just have a little more flexibility for that other building.
yeah, and I want to follow the consent decree also, but if there's latitude in there, I think it's to your advantage or the town's advantage if we have that, that's all. So. It's like,
You ready, Tristan? I don't want, okay. Page 14, Public Works.
$5105, the custodial services, is that just in the hall chamber in this building? That appears a couple times and a couple other line items in the budget. Is that strictly this building? So 5105, I guess it's cleaning services. Is that just this building?
I believe so.
Just because I'm going to ask again on Harbor's when we get
Mhm.
there. It's just,
It's going to be mainly this building and then any other areas that don't have their own separate department building maintenance line.
So by the sort of process of elimination, which is what I'm doing, Paul O'Brien's going to be under rec. Smugglers, the Hospitality Center and Old Harbor are going to be under Harbors. Town Beach is under the Town Beach under rec. So I think we're only left with libraries under the library. And I think we're only left with Town Hall.
so the library must take care of their own. They don't hire outside.
They, I believe, use the same contractor, but it's accounted for in their department 1040
Mansion Beach.
under the Mansion Beach bathroom line.
So, and I raised this question before, but it's still, we've got $30,000 in there under the Thomas property. And, you know, I know you had some explanation the other day, but still, they're brand new buildings. You know, are we contemplating $30,000 worth of work?
We don't know. So. if-
But can't we have a reasonable expectation that maybe 15,000 would cover?
This is the reasonable explanation, extrapolating costs for the current buildings that we have. Yes, they are a little bit older, but you know, this is what the number that comes out of the extrapolation.
Gotcha.
Still seems pretty high. Do we have, by the way, do we have furnishings for those properties? Do we have money for furnishings if we don't have them yet?
They are not intended to be furnished,
they
is my understanding, which is
Right.
going to create a little bit of a gap.
Yeah,
If we rent them,
yeah.
we don't need to rent them furnished, right?
You don't need to rent them furnished.
No. I mean, if we end up using them for summer housing for this summer, we'll get into a,
Then we would have a need, but again, that's not the intended program.
right, okay.
So appliances and other finishings are in the construction budget, but not furnishings, because the intention is that they be unfurnished.
But a refrigerator and a water heater and all of that
Yes.
is in there already.
Yep.
All of the services.
Can you just touch base on the maintenance facilities? It was 56, budgeted 110, requested 150, and then you allocated 110. So with that 40, what was requested, what's kind of cut out from that or?
So originally, that had included the alarm, some alarm maintenance and fire protection fees that are distributed amongst the different building maintenance lines as well.
Thank you.
Great.
I think Tom would also say that with the reduction from 150 to 110, he will be able to do a little less on his painting program than he would like to do.
And on that painting program,
That's good
again,
to
is
know.
that something that is contracted out or we
Yes.
do in-house?
No, currently we're contracting that out.
Okay. And that's the type of thing, I think, when we look down the line.
Well, I think I think, to your point earlier, Bill, sorry, I'm losing my voice. If we want to keep up on this stuff, yeah, it would be very helpful as we approach our decision and adoption of the warrant and the decisions of the council to get a sense from you or from Mona, what drops off there? Is it they have to paint every building 1 year less frequently, or is it, we're not going to be able to paint this building at all and it really needs it? There's some context for that I think would be helpful, because I think we all have the same, I say we all have the same concern about making sure we keep up on maintenance, because, the buildings are just like our houses that need something every 14 seconds.
But I thought the concept of the facilities manager was that there was a program that was going
Yeah.
to keep track of that. So do we have that? And
Right, so the 150, which was requested, included some things that we took out because we found them to be duplicative across the departments.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
we reduced the request, which stretches out the painting schedule from, I think it's 3 years to now to 4 years. It might be 4 years out to 5 years. I can check with Tom exactly. but
okay,
So is this interior painting, exterior painting? What are we talking?
Both.
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 And so like trim on shingled buildings and
Yeah, and it's a little bit strategic, and that's why it's a multi-year program. I've identifies the whole scope. South, part of the Coast Guard station, you're replacing windows, you're going to do the painting at the same time. We had vacant offices for carpeting. That's the perfect time to get in there and do some painting.
right.
Change over in the manager's house. Again, it's empty. Let's get that done. So there's a universe that's defined, and then there's also what can we take
Opportunity.
advantage of in the right opportunity.
Sure.
Okay. Is that a line that if we were like, let's push this and go to the 4%, is that a line that you would increase?
It is, because I think it is, as Bill described, money well spent in that it is keeping up as opposed to deferring.
Right.
And I would argue the fact that, by keeping up or being proactive, you're paying less. I mean, I'm very big in my house.
No doubt.
Very big, I'm proactive, once it's peeling, water's going in, the
I
other
think you
floors.
replace that deck every 3 years.
And it's tracked.
The other thing too is having two people working together on a work site, now we just have one person who's basically alone. Just on the safety factor of it, if he may or may not be
Yeah.
on a ladder.
Right.
In the difference, Mona, between facilities and buildings?
So facilities maintenance is more of a longer range plan, larger projects, not the recurring expenses and not just the quick $100 hardware that you need to fix the door. If
Got
that
it,
makes
got
sense.
it.
And facilities can fluctuate because there could be something that becomes urgent
Mm-hmm.
and may be large. And,
Sure.
Yeah. But the idea behind it is that there are some there's a planned maintenance program, and these are the dollars to support it.
So, and the reason it's separate because the facility one should, like you said, should have an outline plan over the next 3 years, and the other one is the window broke, that type of thing.
And also the recurring type maintenance fees that we may have. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm good.
We sent on Public Works. Which brings us to page 16 in harbors.
I'm sure we heard this the other night, but there was a lot to take in. The training and travel, is that because of the adjustment in the lines?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Guess I have one on the dredging. Is that going to be a land base or are we hoping for the vessel? Is that going to, you know what I mean by that,
Yep.
Mona?
That'll
I
be-
guess I'm asking, is it going to be the excavator on shore or are we hoping for a boat?
We will go out to bid. We understand there may be more opportunities for response from a vessel-based solution. But if not, we will continue with the land-based dredging.
And obviously out to bid.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But do we have any Army Corps, New Harbor or Old Harbor coming into?
I don't believe it's this
This year?
schedule, this year, but,
This
you know,
year is permitting.
whenever they do show up, they'll be nudged around by Kate to
I was gonna say.
do what they can.
Yeah.
And something we should address because it is lost revenue by not having the wharfage.
Yes.
And do we have a dollar amount on that when it comes in toward inland?
We
You
don't.
Is it a 1-for-1?
It's not a 1-for-1. And it's so dependent on the rest of the season that it's hard to quantify, but you can see it. You can see the empty space. And so to that end, we continue to try to push the timing of that dredge window. That's really a big part of it, is if we can only do it in January, it's often filled back in, even if we can get it done and have all the funding. So we haven't been successful at that yet, but continue to try. I could anticipate in the next couple of years wanting to fund a winter flounder study to try to make that argument in a more compelling way, because that's the big barrier.
Timeline about it.
Can we get the timeline changed?
And just because we're going, and someone asked me, I'll come back on the 75,000. This is also contract out, and is that just those the bathrooms at the Assistant Harbor Master Building? Or is that expanding to, say, the Smuggler's Cove bathroom as well?
The restroom maintenance?
Restroom.
Yeah, is Smugglers, Old Harbor, and the Hospitality Center.
Okay. And then also, again, too, the wharfage is helping with all this.
Yes.
Thanks.
I want to acknowledge I was in a council meeting, I don't know, it was a year ago, whatever, before I was on the council, and Kate stood up and she made a real point about wanting to have insurance on the boats as part of the thing.
Yeah.
And if you go back, I know there's $2,000 in here. $2,000 doesn't cover a lot when there's no insurance on anything, so I'm glad it's there. But if you look back, like where there was 8,000 spent, it doesn't take many boats that aren't insured to tally up real quick. So I just want to, I think that's what's kind of held that down. So
She sends the best emails about those boats, I have to say.
yeah, and she stood there,
great.
and I couldn't understand right away why her big
Yeah.
push was on the insurance thing.
Yeah.
And I know we had 3 boats, and she said 2 of them were covered by insurance,
Yeah.
which was good. So
So that's actually going to come back before the council in the next few months, because that was never codified into an ordinance. It was done as a
Oh.
policy, and we'd actually like to formalize it a
Sure.
bit more.
You can tell we oppose it.
Does that become part of the harbor management plan?
Yes.
Once it becomes an ordinance?
it's an
it
ordinance,
gets-
yeah.
We all set on harbors, guys? Move on to
Yes.
building official.
one of my questions on this is it's really not so much the budget. I know, and what I'm hearing back from people in the community, we consult for our building official that comes out, and he has he'll have the permits and goes and does the inspections, and I believe it's primarily Tom drives around and so forth. And really his role, I don't think his role, at least that I understand, is coming out to do so much enforcement of non-building permits from that end of it. And I know we brought this up the other day. I think there's a little bit disconnect between the happiness of people about the enforcement that is not permitted from that end of it. And I think even at our financial meeting last year, a lot of the public was hopping on I forget the gentleman's name that comes out, but I think it's clear that that's not so much his role at that point, unless I'm misunderstood.
No, that's correct. The enforcement, looking for non-permitted work and doing enforcement is not a priority for what we've engaged Forley for. So if that is a high priority of the town and the town council, we'll need to find a strategy to address that.
But more than a priority, we haven't contracted for that aspect.
Correct.
So, which I think is important, so that, again,
Yeah.
in fairness to that person in that role, we haven't contracted out to do that. And that's something I think we need to discuss, whether it be him or whatever it might be from that end of it.
And I,
So I have a,
oh,
oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, I had to say, it was 2 years ago at the financial town meeting that blew up. There were meetings held with a number of the contractors who raised it. I think that resulted in like an extra day a week, or, whatever it was. And then at the next financial town meeting, I didn't hear that. I hear what you're talking about,
Right.
which is less on the inspection side and more on the kind of identifying things that should have been permitted and weren't. That's what
Right.
I hear the same thing I think you do, Bill. And Tristan, you may hear.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say sort of that I had someone contacted me last week and said, if someone's building a shed on their property with plumbing and electricity, does that need to be permitted? Right. So I was like, yes, of course it does. And so I contacted the land use officer and just said, like, what information can I send to this person? She sent me the link to the town website, which is the OpenGov, right? And said, I should just tell this person, you go on to that website and you put in the fire number. And when you put in the fire number, anybody can do this. Anybody can go on to the OpenGov website, put in the fire number of the property that you're wondering about. And if there is a building permit, it should pop right up on, you should be able to see it. So if you're a neighbor of someone and you wonder, like, did my neighbor get a permit for that deck they're putting on or that shed that they're putting in with electricity and water, you can see that information. If you don't see a building permit, then you should contact the building office, right? Is that's the, so I guess just all that is leading up to my question is who enforces that then? Is that
Yeah.
the land use officer? Is that the building department? Who then acts on what has become an inquiry or a complaint by a neighbor?
It's going to be specific to the nature of the complaint. If you're describing something that people believe needs a permit and doesn't, then that's a building issue. If it's what they're building and how it relates to the use of the property, that's a zoning issue. So
Okay.
it depends on the nature of the circumstance.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Who needs to be enforcing.
Great.
So did I hear you say we have contracted for enforcement of building violations?
I don't believe, I actually can't access the full contract right here. I don't believe it is specifically called out. It is certainly not called out to be proactive. There's, again, without the language in front of me, there's probably some interpretation of being the building official that responds to complaints as opposed to looking for violations. And that's the language I'll need to pull up.
And is that something, since Tom drives him around, and must have conversations with them, is that information that Tom could provide to us as to how and when any complaints are handled when he's out here?
I can bring that back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should, I thought that was an area that we were going to concentrate on.
I think whether it's in this budget or, as you settle in, Amy, I think you and I have actually talked in passing about this, and I think it is a whole. By the way, I mean, I have seen, talk about anecdotal, the emails that I see on the bulletin board from Jen around thing, there was just one this week around signs in the historic district. And I was really pleased to see that. Because I actually think that by and large people want to compete, I don't think that by and large people don't want to be in compliance, but those kinds of reminders, et cetera, I think are really valuable, and I appreciate that. I think everybody does.
Yeah, time and place. I think Jen brought it up, needing more staff in there. And I think all of us are kind of a little unclear on the division of work in that department. And I think it's our job to be stewards of the island and the land. And I don't have the answers when people ask me. I'm like, I think it's Jen.
Sure, that distinction between zoning and land use
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
building.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think we should put that on our topic for
Yeah.
discussion.
And I've had several questions about, are we back to, do you have to make a written complaint or can Jen or the building official, whoever it is, just work on what they see or what I say? Because at one time, someone was telling me that they were told, oh, you have to put that in writing.
Particularly in the land use office, given the capacity at the moment, they are focused on responding to written complaints. So
And
that's,
see, I don't see where
that's the-
that's connected to staffing. I mean, so,
Well, it's just an email. I mean, you just shoot them an email. But so the great thing about this website, right? So this information that I passed on to the
Yeah.
person the other day, is that as the person who's wondering, right? You don't need to call them up and tie up the time of the person in the office. You can look it up yourself. Go into OpenGov, put in a fire number. So I applied for a building permit recently and was sort of amazed by using that system, right? Of like what pops up on my own home, right? I was able, shockingly, was able to get my own septic information from the state website and draw that in. It was really interesting. I'm really not technologically adept at all, and I was able to do this. And so you can go on and get all this information, and it'll show up. I mean, when I went onto my own site, it showed dog licenses and building permits and septic.
and
information.
how well known is that out there? I mean.
It's pretty new, right?
know
So
about-
I've known about it for years.
I was gonna say,
I stay away from that.
that's.
For a second.
I thought, no,
it's a field day for nosy Nellies is what I'll tell you. You can
Yeah.
go onto that website and you just put in the fire number and you can see everybody's dog license.
And maybe that's something that again, I go back to, writing it down and submitting it to the Block Island Times and having, a column about that, because I don't think a lot of people even know that it exists. And I get frustrated with the things that don't appear in the newspaper that are more important to people here.
I wanted to go in order, but I noticed that we have our board members from the Early Learning Center sitting in the back.
was
And
just-
and it's getting
Words right
late
out of
and
my
I know
mouth.
that you
Yeah.
have little kids
Good job.
tomorrow. So I guess I'll start off here. And I won't go into depth very far at all. There's a couple things that have come to this council's attention that I'm not going to speak about those things. And I guess I'd ask, Julie, I can't see you behind the
Yeah.
podium. I guess maybe just for tonight and for myself moving forward, I hope maybe the council or some members of the council can vet out some things that we have heard with you and some members of the board.
Yep.
And that,
Right.
that's where I'm going. As I saw you looking at the clock back there.
Yeah, Tracy's gonna go.
Thank you.
So what do you,
So I guess that's a commitment I was asking you, Julie.
yes,
Oh, thank you.
so not tonight, but at some.
Obviously not
Right,
tonight.
yes,
and
great,
at this
yes.
hour and
Oh, yeah, no, I actually, anything you want to talk about, I enjoy talking about everything and I'm very forthcoming. So I just need to be asked the right questions and I can answer whatever you need
yeah,
to.
time and place.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So however you want me to do that, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's been sort of an undercurrent, you might as well, put it out there, about there being less openness, let's say, for people who are concerned about what's going on at the Early Learning Center. And there was, a question as to, well, we had never seen, copies of the bylaws or anything. Are there ways for people to bring their concerns to
So-
the board? Is there a way for the board to raise their concerns? And why does it seem like there's some sense of stonewalling? Put it out there. That's what I've heard.
So I'm not sure because that's new to us. We do have bylaws. We do have a procedure for coming to, we call it parent communication. I mean, I could talk for an hour about what we have, but we
we've always sort of operated the same way. We're very open. We meet and greet parents every morning. We have meetings. We encourage them to come to board meetings. For example, I could provide you all, I did make a little sort of director's notes based on what I had heard, because I'm not privy to the letter, so I had heard. And a couple of things like communication. Apparently, they're saying we're not good at communication. So I did in a positive way, not in a defensive way. I would provide you all with notes about the sort of those touching points that I feel like, or I was told came up. I have a theory as to what is happening, and hopefully it's a small group of people. But we welcome everyone to talk. We are not scary to talk to. Would show anybody anything. We've always been like that. I'm not sure again whether it's a new parent, an old parent, or whatnot. But it was a little disheartening for Tracy and I to hear that. But because we don't want to operate that way. I mean, we want to have a place where it's fun and kids are happy and they're running through the door and bowling Tracy over. So in one particular instance, I must say that we had a board meeting last night, our own board meeting. And the minutes were presented at the board meeting from March 5th. And I would just say to any writers or anyone who got in touch with you, had they been at the March 5th meeting, I couldn't have aligned the March 5th minutes better with what I was hearing we were lacking. Because if that person or those people had gone to that meeting, we discussed all of those things. So it was sort of a timing thing, and it was too bad. But we do encourage parents to go. We have very informal, like living room style meetings, so we make it very comfortable. Anyone that would come is welcome to speak. I've been to many school committee meetings, and they're not quite so encouraging for people to speak. We don't shut anybody down. We don't give anybody time limits, and we sit like in a living room. So I just think that, again, we encourage parents to come. We encourage anyone to come. We send out reminders that we have the meetings. They're set a year in advance. Like the dates of them are set in a year. They're right next door to us in the community center. So I'm not really sure why it all came to a head. I can say in my tenure, we have a process where you go to Tracy first, so talk to your child's teacher first. If you don't get get that resolved with the teacher, then you can either email me or call me or talk to me. If that's not resolved, then Tracy and I usually insist on an in-person meeting. And our experience has been, I think we've had 4 in my 11 years, where it's gotten to the point where we have an in-person meeting. At that point, when all of the facts are in front of them and there's not he said, she said, or email or any of the newfangled things, it ends right there. So even parents that were maybe mildly disgruntled or even more so disgruntled, it usually ends at that place. In my entire tenure, I think only 3 or 4 maybe parents have gone where I then said, you know what, to the board, we didn't resolve this issue. Can we be heard? Can this person be heard in front of the board? Actually, I write to the board president as a procedure. I say what's going on. Like, yeah, I talked to Nancy. We resolved this, this, and this, but we didn't resolve this last piece. And then the board president decides that person can either talk to the parents themselves, or they decide to put it before the full board. So there is a procedure and a policy. We actually just revamped it in November at a board meeting and kind of made it better. I feel like people know. We're going to try to make them know more or know better. We have a public binder that we keep at the Early Learning Center that would have all these things in them. Anybody can look at that anytime. That has the bylaws, that has our policies, our procedures, our minutes, all those things, are in one binder. So anyone can look at those. But yeah, we just have to encourage people to just, talk to us. It's unfortunate that whoever communicated with you didn't talk to us or didn't feel comfortable talking to us or whatever. That's really all I can say.
And I think that's an important part from my perspective.
Yep.
Is it's very clear that people didn't feel comfortable.
Yes.
And for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, that's what raises the red flag.
Well, we can't identify the people. I'm not sure. Yep.
Okay. So from my perspective, that's something that's got to be remedied. Welcome your ideas, but we have a responsibility that, as I said the other day, I'm not sure it's a fiduciary responsibility, but it's a lot of dough. And when we get communications from parents who want to remain anonymous because they're afraid, that's a red flag. And it doesn't matter sort of what area the budget is. And I happen to be somebody who thinks the Early Learning Center is one of the most essential legs of our stool. I'm not, I really think it's essential and I come at it from that perspective. So for me, I would like to see a clear understanding about what's going to happen over the next 12 months in terms of communication, things that need to be updated. What are those things and how do we accomplish them? Because I think right now it's kind of untenable and we'll figure it out. It's not unfigure-outable.
Right. So what I was just going to say is we can't even identify the people. So the people who are saying they weren't heard, we don't even know who they are. So we've had one parent meeting in the last 2 years. That person attended our meeting last night and said, that was actually very helpful, case resolved. I don't know who this person is. I did not get it, read the letters.
Your problem here, Julie,
Yeah.
if I can interrupt you for a moment, is that for me, the
Yes.
problem here was that this is percolating up right now, right? Because it's budget time and, people are feeling like there's an opportunity to ask questions or express disappointment or frustration.
Yes.
But reading all the things that I've read and getting the phone calls that I've gotten, talking to parents, the issues haven't changed. These are the same issues that, that have been existed 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. They're not any different. I mean, I remember there was a big upset many years ago. I went to a meeting with Kathy Zabo, I'll say, because we went because it involved some business owners who couldn't get their children in, and I was working at the Chamber of Commerce at the time. We felt like it was affecting businesses, which is why we went, and we were told we had to pay $5 to vote or to even stay in the meeting. We paid our $5. It was the whole thing was sort of strange. But it's the same problems that existed then exist now. That was 10 years ago. So something has to change. It doesn't matter who the parents are. I feel like this isn't a situation where we need to know who they are so we can like squash them like bugs, right? Like that's how I'm feeling like the reaction is. We want to solve problems. We want to have this daycare situation that enables people to work and to have their children in a safe location where they're socializing and learning, which is happening. But it's not happening in a stress-free manner for the parents. So I wonder, could there be some better communication? Could the bylaws be changed? I'm sensing that there's a structure where you have a board, but the board has no say. The board is window dressing. And I'm wondering if we could have the bylaws rewritten. So like we just rewrote the bylaws for a church group that I'm in. It was a committee of people. It took like 2 months. 2 months was probably more than it needed to take. But it was a bunch of volunteers. But could that happen? Could so that your board is a functioning board that has some, like I asked, people, like I was like, did the board approve the budget? Does your board approve the budget? Right?
Yes.
They should.
We do bring it to a meeting and they approve it, yes.
So, but it's presented to them, they get some input, like we are hearing all about the budget. We're making changes. Our executive director is hearing, and our treasurer are hearing our feedback and making adjustments. They're listening to the public, which in your case would be the parents, and they're making adjustments. And then we're gonna present this budget. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody gets input.
Right.
I don't know whether that's happening over there.
Well, we don't get very many people even attending budget meetings, so that's one issue. We did change the bylaws so that we could effectively continue to do business. Because we weren't getting anyone to the board meetings. So again, paltry attendance by parents. We obviously the board goes over the budget before I present it here or before I hand it in to Amy. And one of the issues is I don't know what I don't know. So I can tell you right now, whatever issues were brought to you were not, definitely not brought to me, and more than likely not brought to Tracy. So I don't know what I don't know. So if they're not bringing them to us and they're doing them anonymously, it's very difficult for me to effectively even respond.
But have you guys made changes in the last year or 2 years or 3 years to improve communication?
We
Are-
have.
You know, I mean, are you getting parents together for,
So do you want me to read, do you want me to read or do you want me to hand out what I have? And we have 25 things we do for communication. So I'm happy to read it out, or like I've made copies for all of you to look at. So again, this is what I consider communication. I don't consider an email blast communication. I consider communication two ways.
right, but I'm going to just stop you again and say that in the narrative that you gave us, you said you have 21 families,
Right.
22 students.
Correct.
It doesn't seem like that many people to communicate with. I don't know why it's going so poorly. So, and the other thing is, you know, so as the town, we want this to work really, really well.
Mhm.
But we're basically, the taxpayers are supporting this at a rate of about $7,000 per student.
Right.
I just feel like we should be having happier parents.
We agree.
happier-
We couldn't agree more, but I don't know who's not happy.
Better communications. I guess I just want to get some feedback from you guys about like, just, I don't think you need to know who it is, right? Obviously, these parents are all calling and asking, begging to be anonymous. And
Well, they're begging to be anonymous because they fear repercussions. They are afraid of retaliation. Repercussions and retaliation have never happened from Tracy and I, so I don't know who they're afraid of, but that's simply never happened. And it's rather defamatory, actually. So then they're anonymous, so they're not even owning it. So that's a big problem for us. I mean, I can't, it's like boxing with a ghost. I mean, I just, you know,
but if we can just say, okay, like, there's a communication problem. Let's just say there's a communication problem, because there is. What steps could be taken to improve that? And could we work out some steps that would be taken to improve that? That would be maybe attached to the money. I don't know if that's a fair way to do it. I don't want to like, I don't know how to do it, but like, could the bylaws be rewritten to make your board a more equal partner in the process? That seems like a really good place to start. And then could there be a plan to improve communication, the communication stream, so that, you know, like at what point can a parent just write a letter to the board and be like, I've got this really frustrating situation that isn't resolving?
well,
Can they do that right now?
typically they go for a process. They talk to Tracy, then they could talk to me, then Tracy and I sit down with them. Typically, it ends there. Because what the parent, in my experience, the 3 or 4 meetings we've had with parents, there's some misunderstanding of something. And when we lay it all out there, they seem to understand, and it's over. Like I said, I can count in less than one hand how many times we've had to draw on the board. So again, I don't know what's even being said.
It's not comfortable with that. They can write a letter to the board and ask the board to hear them.
They should go through the process. They can try to do an end run, which is what's happening, and avoid that. I mean, typically people don't want to talk to Tracy and I because they're going to hear the facts. If they can end run and get to the board without talking to Tracy and I, then they're going to be missing some of the facts. I mean, it's not like we're just going by our policies. We're just literally strictly going by our policies.
Does
And-
this raise in your mind a concern that your policies may need to be updated, and that it would be worthwhile to go to the parent community and say, what would work for you guys?
So I guess if we're talking about our enrollment policies, that's a strong policy we have that sort of sets the tone for what we do. We, over the years, have added a seasonal policy. Molly was involved in that, so that people could come in the fall and stay into the season, and or they could come in the spring and get here early. So that was directly from input from people that wanted that, like business owners or whatever, that want to keep their shop open or open early. So we do have a seasonal policy. Then we have a year-round policy or a school year policy. So that's like 10 months. And the people commit to going. It's obviously a low rate. Again, thank you in part to the town, but also we strive to keep the rates low. So it's a industry standard low rate, and the year-round people get that best rate. When they do, they file a commitment that says, I will come all 10 months and I will pay regardless of absences. So that's the policy. That's just a financial thing. It's also just a commitment. Every parent signs that and then a couple other things that go along with that. In this case, we had, I don't know if Molly, you seem to reference this thing I have, this paper I have, but we had 3 parents approach us. This never happens, it's 3 at one time. They approached us and they needed an extenuating circumstance medical leave. So as director, those policies I just stated, at my discretion, we can give them an exception. In all 3 cases, we gave all of them an exception. And let's just say it was a 4-part exception. Normally, they would not be able, they would have to just pay regardless of their absence. We didn't make them pay. Normally, they would have to unenroll their child if this is an extended period of time. We didn't make them unenroll their child. And when they say unenroll, that means they come back at because now they've changed themselves into a seasonal person. So we let them leave without paying. We didn't make them unenroll their kids. We allow them to come back at the lower rate. The one thing we couldn't do is when they come back, we couldn't guarantee their exact same days because it's not fiscally responsible to like tell some other kid you can't come or someone from our waiting list can't come when I'm holding a spot indefinitely for someone on this type of medical leave. So that is what sparked, in my opinion, all of this, most of this. And this one person is very upset about, and again, remember, I gave the exception to the policy. 3 out of the 4 things we said was fine. The 4th thing would just not be responsible. Even the first 3 things, having them not pay, is really truly not fair to the rest of the parents at the center or to the town, in fact. Again, they're supposed to pay. So we, again, my discretion, took the extenuating circumstances, gave all 3 parents what they wanted. So again, in my opinion, I did it, I bent over backwards for them. So we can't do that very often because we would not have the income to support that. So we can't do that very often. So I think there's other things that sort of spark this. Like Molly said, it's budget season. We can take some, ask some questions and whatever. I wasn't asked any questions at the center. I understand you people might have been. I was not asked anything. Tracy was not asked anything. I didn't deny anybody anything. I'm very open with everything. So I feel like I said, it's like boxing with a ghost. I don't even know what's
So,
being said.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that wasn't, you answered a question I didn't ask. I'm sorry. I was wondering whether you have had this thought that there clearly is an atmospheric problem. I mean, I don't know how, so have you thought about sort of bringing together the interested parties and saying, look, what do you think? What do we need to do differently? What are the struggles here? Why is it that a large number of parents seem to be, and maybe this needs to be a third party, by the way. Why is it that, what would need to change to make this whole community happy, and maybe some of the things you can do, maybe some of the things you can't, maybe some of the things are expensive, maybe some of the, it's just, it ought to be joyful, and it does, and it doesn't feel that way.
Certainly doesn't feel that way for Tracy and I right now.
And then that triggers for the 5 of, not to speak for everybody, but that triggers for the 5 of us are like, wait a second, we got to figure this thing out. And it's not, it's hard to say this and have it sound as, let it carry with it the respect that I have for the work that you and Tracy do, but it's not about you. The Early Learning Center theoretically predated you and will post-date you. It's about what the system is, what the climate is, what the atmosphere is, to use that word again. And I'm wondering whether you're open to, as we go through this appropriation, this is just my idea, can we tie it to some milestones like, we compared our bylaws to 3 other similar places. Here's how other nonprofits run it. We look at and compare how do other early learning centers or preschools, I'm not sure what the right term is. Establish compensation. Are we underpaying people? Do we need to figure out how to bring more people in? How do we, like there's all those kinds of things that routinely get benchmarked and improve. And, I think one of the things, we only have our own experience with our own kids at preschools. The one our kids went to actually was really quite similar to this one in a small town in Connecticut. And they were constantly breathing, if you will. And I just feel like there's a need for some breathing here. That's my own opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I just would love to hear more solutions and less, and believe me, like, it's not easy to stand up there and have people complain. But rather than being defensive but more like, can we switch it to being more like, how are we going to solve this? Just like flip it a little bit. Like, there is a problem. We're hearing a lot of problems. There have been, it's the same things, like I said, that it's the same things. It's a communication thing, and it's a not so open thing. How do we just fix that?
So I just want to I'm just going to read into the record what we do for communication, because I keep hearing communication. I think we are really good communicators. So I'm not sure what we're missing. So we do communicate. And again, communication is a two-way street, it's only one way.
Question that you ought to ask to your families, not us. I can't tell you what works. I don't have kids there. I didn't have kids there. And I think it sort of epitomizes in a way, sort of like the issue that whatever works for me. I want to fund this. Whatever works for me.
Yeah.
But it's, it doesn't work for a number of people, it appears, but maybe that's very easily solvable. I don't know.
I don't even know what it is. So I don't even know what we're talking about. So, I mean, So here's what we do to communicate. We greet and meet every parent in person every morning and afternoon. So any parent at any morning or afternoon could say something to the teacher. We post all the notices, forms, and reminders at the sign-in sheet area so they're not missed. We text reminders to parents about upcoming events, meetings, and notices. We have an open door policy. We're available to parents day, night, weekends. Tracy's often texting parents Saturday night. She'll be like, oh, I'm texting so-and-so. Same with me. Parents can text, call, visit anytime. Parent-teacher conferences are encouraged anytime. When time allows, Tracy sends out photos and excerpts of what the kids are doing during that day. We have mandatory parent meeting in the fall, which serves as an orientation for new families. We have an open house, an art show, and a spring celebration throughout the year. Parents are encouraged to come to board meetings, but they don't come. Parents are encouraged to email us any questions they have about the center, and their emails are always answered promptly. We have a 5-step parent communication policy to address concerns or grievances, which include an in-person meeting with Tracy and I. We maintain a public binder. So that's a lot of communication, I think. That's what we do, and it's like in person and
To be
for real.
honest with you, Julie, I got 3 really awful reports about your meeting last night.
About what?
Your meeting last night,
Yeah,
awful
I'm not surprised.
reports.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It was a very uncomfortable
Just
meeting.
saying, like, things aren't going well.
It was a very uncomfortable meeting, just put it that way.
Yeah. So I just wonder, like, if 3 different people are reaching out to me today
Right.
to say that's not good. Also, I'm not in charge of that. Like,
Right.
you're part of our budget process.
Right.
I can't fix your problems. Nobody at this table can actually, you're not part of the town. You're a
Right.
community group. Are you a nonprofit?
Yes.
You're a nonprofit that we support financially, the taxpayers support financially. Nobody here at this table can make you guys do anything. I think we're all just trying to offer helpful advice.
There's no one more disheartened about this than Tracy and I. Let me tell you that. Tracy's been the teacher there for 23 years. We've had about less than a handful of complaints and anything raised to this level. So something is up, that's for sure. And I don't think it's us.
But we're not even saying it's you. That's that's why I'm actually feeling less optimistic over time when you read that stuff rather than more. Because I don't think you're hearing that there's a there.
Again,
there's a-
I can't fix what I don't know.
You don't have, you have to ask. You have to embrace. You have to say, what do people think?
So we have meetings, Keith, and no one comes. But that's what our board meetings are. Our board meetings are very open. So that would be the opportunity for them to come and say something or what they want.
Based on everything I heard today,
Don't
I
let
would
me act.
never want to go to your meetings. I
I-
thought our meeting last night was super stressful. It sounds like yours was more so.
Okay.
But can I just pivot here to the budget? So your budget isn't presented to us in the same fashion that our budget is with
Yes.
like a projected and a actual. So I only have projected from both years, right?
Right.
In my little photo here. So, and I'm just questioning that like on where you have total program, $110,000 for each year,
Mhm.
right? So last year, the town reduced by $6,000 support,
Right.
right? So you guys raised the hourly fee for parents by $2.
Correct.
But that doesn't seem to be reflected in here because if your total program was $110,000 last year, meaning that's tuition? Separate
Yes, tuition,
means-
correct. Yep.
Right, and then it's the same thing this year. That doesn't reflect $2 an hour,
Well, there's going to be fewer kids.
Hmm?
Fewer children.
but it comes out exactly the same.
Well, it's a projection. So yes, we're going to flip flop. We're going to have more preschoolers and less toddlers and then less overall. So yes.
But there's no actual that we can see. Like how
For-
much did you actually bring in this year?
Sure. I mean, I could run a fiscal report at the end of the
I
year.
just would be curious to see like, how did that work out, right?
Do you have-
Like,
Right.
did that,
I would say it's very close. I think we're at about 94,000 right now. So I think it was fairly close.
okay, coming up to June, right? And
Right.
then, I mean, do you guys have like a contingency fund that you have, like, do you have a separate fund that you have for like emergencies or?
We do have some money for emergencies. Again, we have a fluctuation in the tuition always, so I kind of try to build that into the budget. But I do think that the $2 increase, I think was fair and I think it was reasonable. And I think that will definitely help the center. And we did have to kind of recoup from getting less from the town.
And then like, so it says your goal each year is $20,000 worth of
Fundraising.
fundraising. Like, did you guys achieve that? or-
About 19,008 something this year.
Okay, we're not in a position to be involved in the day-to-day operation of what obviously, there's some issues. We fund, and we want to make sure what we fund is healthy, not only financially, but also mentally and everything else from that end of it. What, in fairness to you and Tracy, the parents and the kids, it seems to me what would be beneficial is to have a third party do an assessment in a positive way. What is working? What could be improved? I don't care whether it's bylaws or, you know, you have a lot of data there.
Right.
Someone independently, because we've all seen this, and when it gets to this point, everyone gets defensive, rightfully so, from that end of it, whether it's yourself or parents. And then it's hard to move forward from that. I think if there's some way there could be a third party that did a independent review or something from that end of it, that can give you those suggestions, I think it would be beneficial for all you. Now, how that, and I'm not talking it has to be a $20,000, I think, I think with a little bit of effort, it could be done much reasonable and hopefully to get things on track and what should have the things noted that are doing well should be noted.
Right.
And things that could be improvements. And I don't know if we have any way that we can assist and facilitate in that. I think it's something we need to give a little thought to, but I don't think it's going to be, I think it sounds like, and I don't know, I don't have a child in it, but it sounds like things have deteriorated to the point, and it deteriorated to the point that it doesn't matter, okay, sit around the table, oh, you didn't see this piece. I think needs a little bit broader view that everyone can be open-minded
I
to
like
it.
that idea.
You know,
That's a good idea.
If I could just read something from the state. So of course, we're state licensed. And I'll just read this is the purpose. So the purpose of the licensing, the primary purpose of licensing childcare centers and school-age programs is to safeguard the well-being of the children served. Granting a license means there's clear evidence that the building and the grounds are safe, staff is appropriately trained, and the program reflects the understanding and the healthy growth and development of the children. The license provides assurance to families and the community that the children are cared for in a safe, healthy environment with appropriate activities, schedules, food, materials, and equipment, and that the staff encourage and support the children's physical and social, emotional, and intellectual growth. So we have a lot of oversight from the state. We get surprise inspections, and this is the whole purpose of why they do that. So there's a lot of 51 pages of mandates and things from the state that we follow. So we are definitely doing that part right. So we're very disappointed that something is amiss. And again, I don't know what it is, so I will try to find out what it is. I'm not sure how to do that. But
We don't need to. There's an issue. We want to do whatever we can to facilitate that. The tools that we have involve our appropriation. The idea of a third party who, if that sounds fine to me, who sort of talks to the parents, talks to you guys, figures, looks at other models, how, not other governance models. I don't mean school delivery models. And we feel, and the community feels confident in it. It's not about, to me anyway, the kind of defending what we have, but it's improving what we have. Clearly, as I said, there's an atmosphere problem, but that doesn't seem like it should be unfigure-outable.
it's news to me, so I don't know. I don't see it.
Yeah, we don't know that much either.
Right.
So, but it seems really clear just in talking today that at this point in time, you can't sit down with the parents and the parents can't sit down with you. So.
Well, I certainly can sit down with anybody. I've not been asked or I've not been privy to.
I
So-
know, but would it not be helpful to get somebody in the middle that can talk to the parents and then can talk to you folks, get the two sides, and then sort of figure out, okay, here's the areas that are of concern. So let's now get together and have a general conversation about these particular areas, that need to kind of brokering the peace, as it were.
Right.
And I just think it would be helpful all around because, and I understand when the frustration in your voice when you say parents don't show up. Shame on them. That seems to be the way of the world these days, though. I mean, we sit here with 3 or 4 people in the audience
Right,
most
exactly.
of the time.
Yes.
But it has risen to the point where people are looking here because it is the budget time and think that we have some way to deal with it. And we're saying, well, we'll help both of you find a way to maneuver through this. But we think that it should be someone kind of neutral.
Right.
Would you be willing to do that? And I don't know where we even find that person, but we can certainly assist in trying to find someone who is a mediator of sorts.
And we have time. Thing you would look at them. I mean, think about all this stuff.
Yeah, because nobody's assessing blame anyplace. We're just, there's stuff floating around out there and it's probably at this stage uncomfortable for both sides to sit and face each other. Let's find some way to mediate between you, if that's okay.
We'd like to get it resolved, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we all want to, so,
Anybody else beat? I'm tired.
No. Well, I really wanted to talk about my, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say, I really did want to talk about my thought about daycare for union employees, but we'll just,
We have
we can talk
time
about that another
in
night.
our meetings.
It's 9:45.
We have time in our meetings next week to continue this.
You have Monday night, which is already posted.
Right.
And then you have a budget hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that we.
And I think Nancy had asked if we could move Monday's meeting. We can talk about that.
I think they got that all squared away.
So
Oh,
they
they
need
did,
to.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, there is no budget on Monday. You have Wednesday for the adoption.
right.
Do you want to,
We can talk about the budget on Monday, or on
Tuesday and-
Wednesday,
Well,
not
you-
Monday.
take it out?
Wednesday.
Do we have
Yes,
time on
you're
Monday or
gonna
no?
have the budget
Okay.
as well.
Like,
So-
you're here Monday?
It is
Yeah,
not
I'm-
agended for
I'm not-
Monday.
I'm not gonna be, they're gonna put off
Oh, okay.
a couple of things to Wednesday.
You could agenda this.
No.
Too
We
late.
don't have the time. It's too late. Oh, right, working days. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Then you could do a special Tuesday.
Meetings every day.
The way we like to do it.
Yeah.
what time is Wednesday, the 7 o'clock?
Planning board.
You know, I'd just rather get it done, you know, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock on Wednesday for an hour or so before.
Well, what do we have left? Let's just,
Yeah.
because maybe we just knock it out in half an hour.
So where we left off before on the building, one of the things, Amy, and I don't want to put a lot of talking, this is going to move, is that I would hope that we can look forward, particularly on the consulting for, with Leaf, I think so it's called. We can look to try to, and I know it's difficult, the licensing and everything else, but it'd be nice if we can't try to set a goal to work towards trying to get someone locally that eventually could get what it would need. I just think it would be, and I know it's difficult because of license stuff, but it can be a well-paying job and.
Yeah, I don't know if we've said this out loud here, but
We back on building.
I jumped back to the building where we had left off.
so, I would say that is something that's on our radar, is developing an in-house, hopefully inspector over the longer term. And we hope to use some of the new academies that the state is putting together to help train people if we can attract candidates.
Yeah.
Obviously, nobody's in mind right now. The programs don't exist right now, but we know that they're coming. And so, that may be something that we ask a council to jump on when the opportunity presents
Sure.
itself. So yes, and.
Well, I look at the success between our town clerk, town managers, police chiefs, I think it's the way to go.
Finance director.
Finance director.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, recreation. Wait, I have a building issue. Or I don't know whether it's building or public works. I have this niggling fear about Jim Jeremiah retiring.
Yes.
And he's just so deeply ingrained. And I heard a really interesting thing. I think it's the Land Trust. It's one of those types of organizations who has had a long time council. And Nancy, you may have had experience with this, where they brought in someone, sort of recognized that it was going to cost a little.
Oh, well,
more.
they hired Pear
Pair,
to work
yes.
with Joe.
And I just think that struck me as really smart, and it's not a this budget year, but since we're off gassing, that concerns me.
And there are a number of background strategies that both we are working on and Jim is working on to do our best to support life after he is no longer willing to work. So it's
Great.
not-
He says he's got a few more years in it.
Yes.
Terrific. I'm not, it just, you know how you have those.
we're already
Yeah.
having those conversations and putting things in place.
Yes, thank you. Recreation,
I don't know.
page 18.
Well, I just had a question on Red Benson Beach decking replacement. I I don't even remember when Sandy was, but I thought all those decks were redone back when that happened. Of course,
Ye-
now you'll tell me that was 20 years ago. or
Right, so
something.
Sandy was 2012, but we did do a rebuild subsequent to that. But we're now, I think, 6 years off of that rebuild, and so we are getting ready to do ongoing maintenance then on decking and plumbing, which are the two major components of that building. So in that, you're talking about a capital line item there. I think it's $30,000 every 2
Yeah.
years. And that is both decking and plumbing as things start to go.
Okay.
So
Any other rec? Library. Tristan asked his good question about the movement to assistant director. Any others? GIS technology?
Only a quick one. I thought it was whether it was in June of last year where it seemed like there was a chunk of money that was held over on technology for equipment. Is that still
we've
available?
been unwinding that. So we talked about it a little bit on the police side, and then we're also doing most of a lot of the security upgrades and hardware replacement that we've needed in the town hall network have come out of that money.
Out
So
of
there
that.
is still a balance. I can look up what it is, but that's why we haven't materially increased equipment replacement and why we're comfortable being a little bit thin on the consultant technology line, because we're still able to use some of that funding to
funding?
do ongoing projects.
Right.
Okay, good.
Gotcha. Boards and commissions?
Yeah, this is the one where I had raised the question going forward that we talked, there was a discussion of putting in a 20-hour a week for short-term rental and enforcement. And I said, I didn't think that was really necessary. This year, most of the grunt work for the application should be fine. I don't care. I don't know how the rest of you feel about enforcement on the short-term rentals. But I do think that land use and Jen are going to have a lot of work this coming year with the changes in the zoning and planning requirements and what is going to fall on her. So, I think we need to put some extra staff in, but I don't want to designate it for short-term rentals. I think it should be for what's going to be needed. Under the new ordinances, there's quite a few things that fall on the land
Tons of
use
things.
officer.
And I think this is only the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
For me, this short-term rental thing, no surprise, I was a supporter of it. I think it made a great deal of sense. But I am mindful and respectful of the amount of pressure that it put on our resources. I think we're already seeing the benefits of it just in terms of data that we're collecting. That is immensely valuable, and I'm very supportive of the designated line item.
Well, I'm only saying, I was not in favor, but that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with it. I think there was a whole lot of work that fell to them because there had to be the ISDS information. But all that applicant work is pretty well done. So I don't think it's going to be this should be
That'd be
just a
great. Yeah.
renewal.
That'd be great. Yeah.
But I don't necessarily want to waste time with tracking down enforcement for 20 hours a week when there's a whole lot of other
Well,
zoning and planning and enforcement.
Since your day as town manager, we have heard the same refrain consistently. And that is, we pass ordinances well, and we do a shitty job, excuse me, a not very good job enforcing. And this was a major initiative where we are putting resources behind enforcing it. And whether it's bicycle chains or bicycle chain requirements or short-term rental requirements, I like the idea of passing these major things, have budget implications, and they have investment implications, and they ought to be enforced.
But don't we have a built-in procedure? Don't you have to take your number and utilize it going forward? So that's going to be a way to track
And I
fairly
think part of
easily.
the enforcement is to go through and make sure that you have done that. So what I can say is in doing a lot of research leading up to this, I spoke to a lot of enforcement officers in other towns, and so bearing in mind that a lot of them have so the guy in Newport who I talked to several times, their ordinance is a lot more exhaustive than ours, but they're constantly going after people who are renting in zones where you can't rent, or they have a lot of parking requirements attached to theirs.
Oh,
They're
yeah,
going
they-
after that, but it's a lot of people renting in locations where it's not legal, renting without the permit, advertising without the,
Renting with the permit identified with a number of bedrooms that's inconsistent with what's
yes.
issued.
So that's, I think, one of the things that we're already running into. I don't know. I mean,
Oh, well, how about 10 hours a week out of
it-
this
I
for
think it
the?
is 10 hours a
That's
week.
within here.
It is 10 hours a week.
This is, I had written down 20 hours.
The request was for 20, the funding recommendation is for 10.
Oh, well, can we, then this is a place where I would ask that there be, if you want to keep enforcement for the short-term rental, fine. But I think we need some other assistance in the,
I'd be
Glenn's
very
office.
open to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that would be my question. So if this position can be enforcement for short-term rentals, could they also be enforcement for zoning regulations? Or,
So in order to keep things somewhat clean and not just have a bucket of activities that's not well defined, the thought was as short-term rentals move from this initial processing to more of a renewal, which still has a lift, but a lot of the septic in particular has come off. That can be done more at a clerical level with some supervisory assistance. And so you can probably accommodate both administration of the renewal and the enforcement together. We could structure that differently, but treating it that way as a short-term rental related item made it cleaner to talk about.
Okay.
Rather than whatever else may be assigned. And that would then free the existing staff whose scope already involves things like zoning enforcement to do that work.
So are you saying that with simply a short-term rental person for what, the 10 hours, that it will free up staff that's in there? But who's there? Is Jen and
Amanda?
Amanda, and how, is she full-time or?
Yes.
And was she just all involved in the short-term rentals last year?
In addition to all her other work, yes. It was.
So but
What question are you asking?
I think that the level of work, when you look at the zoning and planning ordinances and what is going to not have to go through planning or zoning, but fall on the land use officer
Mhm.
going forward, that there's going to be enough staff to handle that. And if they were overloaded last year and you're only moving 10 hours off, does that lead, you folks have a better idea, but boy, when I look at those ordinances and I think of what they're dumping on a land use officer to make a decision on, we just don't, I don't know whether they were operating in the theory that towns have 2 or 3, free staff floating around to do all of this.
So I would support adding additional 10 hours there.
that's what I was just gonna ask. Do you think that
Yeah.
we should have an addition of 10 hours just to a position in there?
Why don't we try that and see how,
Is that something you could configure?
So just to be clear, what you're looking for is a recommended budget amount that supports an additional 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
Which would be reflected in the requested column there. the 71,427 plus roughly 15,000 because that becomes a part-time benefit position.
Right.
This is gonna be a different person. It's not going to be, an additional person. There isn't someone you have right now that's 20 hours, you're gonna make it 30, make a 20-hour position to become benefit eligible for.
Does that make sense to you, Amy?
It does. It in the short term becomes more interesting to staff.
I see.
But that doesn't mean it's not the right long-term solution.
I see.
But we should also look to see that if we end up doing any additional enforcement, whether it be building or whatever it might be, that it dovetails on that one position, so we're not.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this is I sort of view this as a really valuable first good faith step on a lot, on a lot of this. And
I don't take adding employees like.
Nor do I.
Yeah.
But I think this is one that we really need to, it's a whole.
And also, these are enforcement positions, which I would assume end up collecting
If you've heard
fines,
that for years. and
collecting
years.
fees, right? I mean,
The goal isn't to collect the fee. The goal is to get to compliance.
get things.
Yeah.
Right, true, right. But I mean, like if somebody is building something without a permit and now you're getting the permitting fees,
Yes.
right? So well, it's not like it's gonna pay for itself or anything, but at least there'll be some fees attached to it.
great.
It's the honest people, honest.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the truth. Community support.
Where that's at, huh? Cool. All right, fire department, under Chris Hobie's leadership, we've had a couple of new pieces of apparatus, so just looking at their breakdown here. Absolutely, the fire testing continues on the maintenance, his NFPA is doing his pump and his hose testing. The fleet contract, I'm understanding, and then the general equipment, I hope he's thinking that that's the hand tools. I guess where I'm gonna jump down, absolutely EMT reimbursement. I was hoping to get some numbers in the narrative, so that I was searching for, on new EMTs at, basically 15,000 and then the 30 for the firefighters as well. I know that the department's got some in-house instructors now that are working with the fire academy. And I understand that the State Fire Academy does charge for some of their times. I would have liked to have seen that breakdown on how much we're using the academy and what they're charging there. EMT compensation, that's good. So I guess this is for you, Mona or Amy. The communication line, now, fire department, we're using 911 and 3220 for the FD. So is this personal cell phones at 5,000? And that's in their narrative. And could stop there. And then just bringing up something that I would like maybe Amy to help us with on the, just today, I believe. The doctor spoke about that we're not transporting patients to higher medical. I would hope that maybe we could recoup some of these, because now that the travel, which they talk about, running the ambulance and such on the boat, that maybe that's an opportunity to reimburse. So I would like to explore some of the billing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have questions on that. And then just kind of the miscellaneous again. Oh, I skipped one. Office equipment and the supplies. That's
But
6,000.
I would like more from I don't mean this negatively, but more from Allison, then I'll look into that. Because I think we need to advocate on that definition with, whether that's with the federal, whether
rural.
that's with the Rural Health Administration or
Yeah.
we get a lot, apparently Allison has told me that we get a fair bit of attention from the State Department of Public Health, because we're the only rurally designated place in the state.
Rhode Island.
So I really, I get why it was a wall we ran into, but I think we should figure out whether we can run around it or break through it.
And she had said she'd report back to
Yeah,
us.
yeah, and she's so.
And even if we don't end up with the medical center, we still have several runs that go to the Wesley Hospital, that go on
Right,
the ferry.
yeah.
So any is better than nothing,
Sure,
so it's worth
absolutely.
exploring it.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be a great improvement in somewhere that was designated. But I
yeah,
think because if that isn't able to be designated, I think we should still explore. I can tell you, there's quite a few times that rescue goes over to. the,
sure, yeah,
Yeah.
mainland.
yeah.
Go back on that. So I guess I'm looking for clarification before we completely fund their whole budget. One with the 5,000. And then on the communications, because I know that you're working on transferring that over with Howell's department, which that's a monster that's coming. And
And I feel like,
department is running it, and I feel like it's not represented, but it's coming.
no, I think we're running it
Yeah.
and we're paying for it. And this communications line in the fire rescue budget represents costs that are billed back for, say, replacement radios for EMTs or firefighters. So separate from the maintenance of the head end, if you will. I'm not sure exactly what the wireless component of that is. I can ask and find out, but the rest is sort of incidentals
Right.
for fire costs.
Yeah, the 62, the 2, the 5, kind of jumping right out. And it happens, it's been happening since I can remember. It's always been to the town support between maybe the early learning center and the fire department. But the fire department is fortunate enough to get a lot of contributions from the taxpayers. So I'm not, at this point, not in favor of a complete level funding until we get some clarification on some of these items. You want me to give you a total?
I'd rather get them here rather than try to defend their budget myself.
Oh, okay.
So-
Well, we have time.
Yeah, I'd love to see if they could be here on Wednesday to answer your questions directly.
Okay.
Julie? You have to come up to the microphone. Sorry.
So just a buzzword I've heard with regard to the billing, they use the word, it needs to terminate at a hospital. So whether you can do a run around with the rural words, that's what they always said. So for example, when we take a patient from the medical center to the airport to go to Lifestar to terminate at a hospital, that we could bill for. But we couldn't do it from the original run from the downtown to the medical center. So maybe, so that terminating at the hospital.
Good way around.
Well, that's what they use, those terms, terminate at the hospital.
Yeah.
So that's. yeah.
So if the rescue goes from the medical center on the boat to the hospital.
Same thing.
That
It's
would.
gonna terminate the hospital, so that should be a billable. fund.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, we were gonna find out.
Oh, right. Thank you. Thank you. Speak into my ear trumpet.
And can I just ask a question about, because the news is constantly talking about with the tariffs, everything dealing with cars and trucks is going up. The pumper that was approved in November, where are we on that? Yeah, because I would think the sooner the better. I thought there was going to be a price rise in January of that. Kristen, am I right on that or not? I don't know. I
can't report on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Any others on community support?
Are we still in the same place with the visitor center? Okay.
When did they vote? Doesn't tourism have to vote?
Tourism has a meeting on Wednesday. I
On
can't
Wednesday.
say whether they're
Gotcha.
going to act.
No,
on
I
it or
wasn't
not.
asking you to be accountable
Uh,
for
Did I say Wednesday is the 8th, whatever
it.
the
Yeah,
8th is.
Okay.
How much of an increase is that for the tourism council? Or did they not fund it before? Just a ballpark.
They
yeah.
did
did some.
roughly
10?
15,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
School support? I don't have anything there. Capital tax?
Oh. let me just- I know I had click something. Is there something, there is something in capital taxes, I can't find it now, for the transfer station? And that was another item that there was, what, about 40 or $43,000 held over from June for the transfer station, I thought. Is that still there or?
I feel like we came pretty close to zeroing it out last year, but I could be wrong. I was laughing, not at you, I was laughing at myself because it has been in every capital tax for what, the last 5 years, Amy? At least.
25 years, we're gonna fix the roof.
I think we zeroed it last year.
Okay. Okay.
And the school roof had requested 53, but did that get picked up between what they had going on, I assume, for the?
We declined to put that forward because between the ongoing projects and the amount of capital reserve they have available, I'm confident.
Very good.
Anything else? If not, can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So move.
Second, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. I have a motion to adjourn. So moved. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those no. Amy,
Did we
Well,
resolve? what we-
Billy, thank you for